Welcome everyone to this special session of the seminar that we co-organized with Francisco and myself, Marina Trakas. This is a special occasion because we are finishing the year, so we organized this workshop together with Melanie Rosen from Trent University, who works on philosophy of dreams. And well, that's also this workshop, it's going to be quite interdisciplinary. That was the idea to end the year. Francisco, do you want to explain a little how it works?
Oh, yes. Okay. I was just checking YouTube. This meeting is currently streaming at YouTube. Today we are going to have 3 speakers. Each speaker is going to have approximately 40 minutes for their presentation, and then we will allow for 20 minutes for you to ask questions and to discuss and debate about the recent talk. And in that moment, you can open your microphones, of course, waiting for our permission, and in order just to moderate the discussion. And of course, the other speakers are welcome to participate in the debate. And well, I can present our first speaker. No? Well, my name is Francisco Gallo. I'm from the lab Sueño Memoria from Argentina. And our first speaker is Susanne Diekelmann. She's a research associate from the University of Tübingen. I don't know if that's correctly pronounced. At the Institute of Medical Psychology and Behavioral Neurobiology. So, Susanne, if you want to share.
Before we start, Francisco, maybe Melanie can present a little the.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yes, and then Susanne can start.
So I've set up a Padlet and a gather town. So the Padlet is for any comments that you want to make that last longer than when you go off the Zoom. So the good thing about the Padlet is that if we have a whole bunch of comments at the end, you can keep everyone's comments. So any comments you want to have be kind of permanently in the Padlet, you can make there. I'll repost the link right now in the comments, but it's also in the email that was sent around to everyone. And there's also a Gather Town, which is a social event where we go into a room and chat with each other separate from the Zoom. So that will be after the last talk. Take a break from the final talk, and then you can come back and bring your beer, wine, coffee, and tea, and or all of them, and and come and chit chat with people about the wonderful new insights that you've gained from the day.
So, Susanne.
Yeah, thank you very much for the nice introduction, and also for inviting me to this really exciting workshop. So I'm especially happy to give the introductory talk today. I will share my slides first so that you can see what I will be talking about. So my first presentation will be about memory reactivation during sleep. And because it's the first talk, I thought I might give a very brief introduction into sleep and what sleep actually is, because I'm not sure if everyone is really familiar with sleep and the underlying physiology. So sleep is defined as a specific behavior that is characterized by certain criteria, which is a recognizable posture, so mainly muscle relaxation, quiescence, and no movement. Then reduced responsiveness to external stimuli. So there is an increased arousal threshold to activate the individual. The third criterion is a rapid reversibility. So unlike coma, which is not reversible, at least not so quickly. And the last criterion is the regulation by a homeostatic process, meaning that we need more sleep when we don't get enough sleep. So this is also called sleep rebound after sleep deprivation. And if we consider these criteria for sleep, it becomes evident that basically all animals that have been studied so far show some form of sleep behavior, even fruit flies, for example, or certain worms. There are a number of studies on different animals showing these types of criteria for sleep. But in humans, so I will mainly talk about human sleep today. Sleep is characterized by different sleep stages and a specific sleep architecture across a night. So here you can see one night of about 8 hours of sleep and the different sleep stages. So from wake, we typically go into a very light sleep, stage 1 and 2, and then sleep stages 3 and 4 are deep sleep. So the further down you go, the deeper sleep becomes. And then there's a fifth sleep stage, which is Rem sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, which is characterized by fast, very rapid eye movements. And typically we have something like 5 of these cycles going into slow wave sleep, which is deep sleep, and followed by REM sleep, and another of these cycles, about 5 of these cycles per night. So each cycle is about 90 minutes. Yes?
Susanne, excuse me. I believe you're not sharing correctly your screen.
I'm not?
We are seeing the power, the first slide.
The first slide.
Yes.
Okay, wait, I will.
You have to share all your screen and then put.
I see. Okay. Okay, so I share the whole screen like this.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay. So
Yes,
I'm
okay.
sorry. So,
No.
but now I cannot go forward or backward.
Maybe click.
Yes, when we tried before, I did it the same way as I did now. What do you see now?
The PowerPoint program.
Yes,
The first slide.
Yes.
Is the first slide, yes.
Okay, wait. Do you see the sleep definition now?
Sleep definition, yes. Now it is.
Okay, but I can't go forward. No. Okay. Okay,
Yes.
I see. So
Now it's perfect.
Now you can see the definition, right? Okay, perfect. So yeah, I already told you about the 4 criteria and the sleep architecture. So this is what it looks like basically. The 4 sleep stages and the 5 different sleep cycles across one night. So here you see slow wave sleep, so deep sleep stage 3 and 4, and REM sleep here, the black bars. And what you all can also see is that slow wave sleep mainly occurs during the first part of the night, and REM sleep mostly occurs during the second part of the night. So this is something that is very consistent. And the brain activity is characterized by very specific patterns that we observe in the different sleep stages. Here you can see the activity during wakefulness as compared with the other sleep stages. And what is most obvious is that the deeper we go into sleep, the higher the amplitude gets and the slower the frequencies. So one typical sleep oscillation that I will also talk about in my presentation, because it's very important for memory consolidation and reactivation, are these specifically high and slow oscillations, the so-called slow oscillations that we see in deep sleep and slow wave sleep. And another important feature that's also related to memory consolidation are sleep spindles. This is what you can see here with a frequency of about 12 to 15 hertz. And we know that these spindles are also related to neuronal plasticity during sleep. And both of these will also be part of my talk a little later. Now, sleep probably has different functions. So we still don't really know if there is an essential, one of the most important functions of sleep. There are probably more than one functions. Of course, energy savings is one important function during dark in humans. Maintaining inner homeostasis and set points, for example, in the metabolic system, but also in the hormonal system. We know that sleep is also important for recovery, for growth, for restoration. For example, for the brain, it's especially important to remove toxic waste products during sleep. Mental health is also relates strongly to sleep. We know that many psychiatric disorders are related to sleep disorders and also emotional dysregulations that might be related to sleep disturbances. Immune functions are also very important because especially the immunological memory, for example, the memory that is built after vaccinations also depends on sleep. So these are all very interesting functions of sleep. Unfortunately, I don't have that much time today, so I will focus on this last function, the memory consolidation function of sleep, because that's also my personal area of research. So there are a number of studies that show that sleep is important for memory and especially for memory consolidation, so which is the strengthening and the stabilization of memory after encoding. And I want to show you a very early study investigating this question already from the 1920s. In this study, subjects had to learn nonsense syllables and then they either were allowed to sleep or they stayed awake either for 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, or 8 hours. And you can see there's this typical forgetting curve. So with prolonged time, we remember less of the initially learned material. And if the subjects were allowed to sleep after learning, the forgetting curve was much flatter. So at the end of the 8-hour period here, the subjects will still remembered about 5 to 6 of the syllables compared to basically nothing or even only one syllable after wakefulness. So sleep seems to at least protect or even actively facilitate memory consolidation. So this is also a question that has been studied a lot, whether it's more like a passive protection or an active consolidation process. And I also want to show you data supporting the active consolidation theory. Now, we certainly don't need all memories that we encode during the day. So we are confronted with a lot of information across one day. And you can ask whether sleep would consolidate all of this information or whether there's a sleep can also select and prioritize maybe even the contents. And there could be different factors facilitating memory consolidation during sleep or prioritizing, for example, the salience, so if something is important, or the intention, if something's relevant for the future, or novelty or reward. So one question is whether memory consolidation during sleep is selected, maybe especially for memories that would be needed in the future. Now I want to show you one study that we did a few years ago where we trained subjects, so young human subjects. They had to learn word pairs like ball and square. And in the next day, they were shown the first word and they had to recall the second word. And then we had two groups of subjects. The first group was told about the recall test on the second day. So they were told that they would have to memorize the word pairs because they would be tested. And the other group was told that there would be no memory test in the next day and that they would do different tasks on the next day. And then for each of these two groups, we had 3 subgroups of subjects. One subgroup was allowed to sleep during the night, another subgroup stayed awake, and the third group did the learning session in the morning, stayed awake during the day, and was then tested in the evening. And what you can see here in the next slide is the memory performance on the next day. Of course, those subjects who were told that there would be no test, they were tested anyways, unexpectedly. And here you see the black bars are those that expected the test and the white bars are those that did not expect the test. And interestingly, there's only a significant sleep effect for those who expected the test. So those who expected the test and were allowed to sleep showed the best memory performance compared to both weight groups. And this benefit was not observable in the group that did not expect the memory test. So if you think the material is no longer relevant, then sleep also does not support the consolidation of this material. And then we looked at possible mechanisms behind this selection of content during sleep. So we looked at slow oscillation activity during sleep. And we saw that the higher the slow oscillation activity, the more word pairs were recalled. But this was only seen in the group that expected the retrieval test, but not the group that did not expect the test. So the black dots are those that expected the test and the white dots are those that did not expect the test. So slow oscillations might be implicated in this selection of memory during sleep. So we believe that there actually is some kind of active process that leads to the consolidation of memories during sleep. And in the active system consolidation model, we proposed that there are basically 2 systems in the brain, a long-term store and a temporary store. Typically for declarative memory, this would be neocortex and the hippocampus. So during encoding, memories are probably encoded parallel into the neocortex and into the hippocampus. But the hippocampus is a fast learning store, so these connections are very strong, at least rapidly. They are rapidly strengthened. And the long-term store is a slow learner, so it takes longer for these connections to become stabilized. And now the idea is that during sleep, memories become reactivated, starting in the hippocampus, so in the fast learner, because the memories are stronger there, the connections are stronger. And this then leads to a reactivation of the neocortical long-term traces as well, so that over time, these traces can become strengthened and can become independent from the hippocampal memory trace. And there are actually interesting studies in rats. So I want to show you one study in rats showing that there is also this type of reactivation, or also called replay, on the neuronal level that you can actually measure. In this study, rats were trained to run along a track in a maze. And the activity from single places in the hippocampus and also from single neurons in the cortex was recorded. And what you can see here when you look at the hippocampus first is a certain sequence of firing where, while the rat runs along the track. So these are single cells that basically show at which point, at which place in the track the rat currently is. So there's a sequence of neuronal firing, and the very similar sequence of neuronal activity becomes expressed again during subsequent sleep. So after the running experience, the rats are allowed to sleep in their home cage, and the activity is still recorded. And you can see that it looks like the same sequence of neuronal firing is played again, is replayed during subsequent sleep. And if you take a look at the scale here, you can see that the replay during sleep is a bit faster than during the actual learning experience. And very similar firing sequences are also observed in the cortex during running and also during subsequent sleep. So this could actually be the underlying mechanism for memory consolidation during sleep, which then would lead to neural plasticity and the strengthening of cortical memory traces. Now, this memory reactivation can also be manipulated externally, for example, by using specific sounds. This is one study again in rats. This time rats were trained to run along a track either to the left side or to the right side. And the activity of single neurons and place size was again recorded. And in this study, the subjects here heard, not the subjects, the rats, heard one of two tones. So whenever the rat was running to the left side tone was played, and whenever the rat was running to the right side tone was played. And then again, the rats were allowed to sleep, and the activity was recorded. And then the tones, either the left side tone or the right side tone, were played again during sleep. And what the group by Wilson observed was that when the left side tone was played, the replay activity was more similar to the neuronal activity that was observed when the rat was actually running to the left side. And when the right side tone was played, the neuronal activity, the sequence patterns became more similar to the patterns that were observed when the rat was actually running to the right side. So these external cues, like these sounds that are associated with a learning experience, with the memory of this learning experience, can trigger the reactivation, the replay of the associated neural activity during sleep. And we wanted to test this phenomenon in human study, in a human sample. And in this very first study from our lab, we used odors instead of sounds, because odors become very strongly associated with memory contents, and they are also less disturbing for sleep because we don't wake up from odors as compared to sounds. So in this study, our subjects learned a memory task, like a 2D object location task, like the game that probably all of you know. They had to learn card pair locations. And during learning, they smelled a specific odor. In this case, it was roses. And then they went to sleep. Here you see the typical sleep profile again. And then the odor was presented again during slow wave sleep. And the idea was that the odor would reactivate the associated memory contents. And in the next morning, subjects were tested. They were shown the first card, and they had to indicate the location of the second card. What was found in this study was that when the odor was presented during learning and during subsequent slow wave sleep, the memory was significantly improved compared to a placebo condition in which no odor or an odorless vehicle was applied. Interestingly, this did not work when the odor was presented during REM sleep, and it did also not work when it was presented during wakefulness. And importantly, this is the experiment 2 is an important control condition to show that it's not simply the odor that improves sleep quality in general. So when the odor is only presented during slow wave sleep, but not during subsequent, during previous learning, then we also do not see this effect. So it's not an unspecific effect, but the odor needs to be associated with the learning content. Now, after this study, we asked ourselves what are the mechanisms underlying this reactivation effect? Because we know from memory reactivation studies during wakefulness that there's actually some effect that is called reconsolidation that is associated with the labelization of memory contents. So we asked whether memory reactivation during sleep would rely on comparable mechanisms, on similar mechanisms, or on different mechanisms than memory consolidation during wakefulness. So when we look at the idea of the reconsolidation model, it's basically similar to the memory consolidation model that we have in the sleep field. So the idea is that memories are initially in an active state and labile state where they are sensitive to disruption, and then over time they are consolidated into an inactive state where they are stable and no longer insensitive to disruption. So this is basically long-term memory. But then the idea of the reconsolidation theory is that when these inactive stable memories become reactivated, they can return into an active state, a labile state, where they are again sensitive to disruption. And in this state, they need to become reconsolidated in order to return to an inactive, a stable state. So we asked whether maybe reactivations during sleep would also lead to something like probably at least transient labelization of memories. And we thought that this labelization would be beneficial because it would help to integrate the new memories into the pre-existing network of long-term memories in the neocortex. So we tested this idea again with the same paradigm that I just showed you, with the odors associated to card pair locations. And this time we had two groups of subjects, one that stayed awake and one that was allowed to sleep for a very short period, like only 40 minutes of sleep. And again, we presented the odor or the vehicle during the sleep or wake period. And then as an addition to this experiment, we had an interference task. So subjects were awakened after 40 minutes, and then they had to learn another card pair location task with the same card pairs. The first card was also at the same position, but the second card was at a different position. So this is quite difficult to learn actually. And then half an hour later, we tested the original memory that subjects had learned, in this case without the odor. And what we found was really interesting. So if we look at wake group, we see what would be expected from the reconsolidation theory. So when the subjects were presented with the odor, with a reminder during wakefulness, and then they learned the interference task, this interference task disrupted the memory, speaking for a labelization of the memory by the odor reminder. Now, what happens when we present the odor reminder during sleep? So you can see here something completely different happens. We do not see a labelization and a disruption by interference, but on the contrary, we see a stabilization of memory with the odor and a resistance to interference. So this was quite interesting for us. And to look at the underlying neuronal mechanisms, we repeated this study in the fMRI scanner. So subjects had to sleep for a short period in the fMRI scanner or stayed awake. What we found was that in the wakefulness condition, there were certain activations in the prefrontal cortex, mainly in the lateral prefrontal cortex, that are also related to conscious recollection and prefrontal control. And during sleep, we saw brain areas that are related to memory consolidation. And here, mainly the hippocampus and different neocortical regions are implicated in long-term memory storage, like the retrosplenial cortex. So reactivations during sleep and during wakefulness seem to have different effects and also seem to rely on at least partially different mechanisms. And then there was one interesting observation that we made when I go back to this slide, was that I told you before, there are a number of studies showing that sleep is beneficial for memory. But if you compare here the vehicle conditions, the placebo conditions, there was basically no difference. So we would have expected that even without the odor, the sleep conditions should show better memory performance than the wake condition. So we thought that maybe this very short period of sleep, 40 minutes, is just too short for us to see, or for the memory consolidation effect to express in behavioral memory. And in a follow-up study, we tested this question. So we asked whether there's a specific time course of memory reactivation during sleep. We had two groups of subjects, one that again learned the same memory task, in this case without odor, and then they were allowed to sleep for 40 minutes or stayed awake 40 minutes. And another group that was allowed to sleep for 90 minutes or a comparable wake interval. And the interference task and the retrieval task were exactly the same as in the previous study. And what we found was that we could replicate the non-existing sleep effect after 40 minutes. So 40 minutes do not seem to be enough to yield a sleep benefit in this task. But after 90 minutes of sleep, there was a pronounced sleep benefit compared to the wake interval. And when we compare this benefit with the benefit that we observe after odor reactivation, we see that it looks very similar, actually. So 40 minutes with odor reactivation leads to the same behavioral effect than 90 minutes of sleep without odor reactivation, suggesting that the reactivation might speed up the process of memory consolidation during sleep. And I'd like to show you another study where the authors looked at whether this reactivation has to be specific or can be specific with certain memory cues. So if we present these memory cues, do all memory contents or all associated memory traces become strengthened and consolidated, or are these cues very specific for single memory traces? Because in these studies that I've shown you so far, the odor is associated to the entire learning experience. So when we present the odor, the whole learning experience is reactivated. So in this next study, the authors looked at a procedural memory task, which is like similar to playing the piano. So the subjects were presented with 4 positions on a screen, and each of these positions were corresponded to a key that had to be pressed on the keyboard. And every time a certain location and the corresponding key was pressed, a specific tone occurred. So for example, the right position was highlighted, then the right key was clicked, and the tone occurred at the same time. And then the same happened for the next tone and the next tone, and so on. And the subsequent tones produced some kind of a melody overall. So this was a melody of about of exactly actually 12 elements, so a 12-element sequence of tones, and it was always repeated, so it was the same melody basically. And what the authors did in this study was they played the melody again during subsequent sleep to reactivate the memory, but they played only half of the sequence of the melody, and the other half was not played during subsequent sleep. And what they found was that after a 3-hour sleep period, the part of the melody that was cued during sleep, so that was played again, for this part, subjects showed better performance after sleep compared to before. But for the uncued part of the sequence, there was no change in memory performance. So sleep and sleep reactivation seems to be specific for the content of the reactivated memory and seems to have different effects than reactivation during wakefulness. And these two insights taken together led us to run another study together with Cecilia Forcato from Buenos Aires here, using different reminder cues. Cecilia had used similar paradigms in her reconsolidation studies during wakefulness. And she showed that when we do the training with a specific association, for example, we have a sound here, like a sound of a thunderstorm that is associated with the word Gewitter, which is German for a thunderstorm, because we did the study in German. Then you can use different reminder cues based on this training protocol. You can have complete reminder cues that are formed of the sound and the entire word. So this is exactly the same as during training. Or you can use incomplete reminder cues. Sound associated with only the first part of the word, the first syllable, in this case, so the first syllable of Gewitter. And in her previous study, Cecilia had used a similar paradigm showing that only these incomplete reminders can labelize memory traces during wakefulness and lead to reconsolidation. But these complete reminders do not induce labelization and reconsolidation processes. And Cecilia adapted her previous paradigms for our purposes to see whether similar differences would be observed during sleep. So in the first study, we first checked whether for this paradigm, similar results would be observed for reconsolidation during wakefulness. So we had 4 groups of subjects that were trained on day 1. And on day 2, they either received the complete reminder or the incomplete reminder. And then they either, after reminder presentation, either received interference learning or no interference learning. And the interference learning was very similar to the original training with the same sounds, but different associated words, so new words. And then the memory was tested on day 3. And what we found was that for the complete reminder, there was basically no difference whether interference was learned after the reminder presentation or not. So suggesting that the complete reminders did not induce any labelization. There was no updating and no reconsolidation process. But for the incomplete reminder, we found that the memory performance was reduced. So there was significant forgetting when the incomplete reminder was followed by interference learning, which was not the case when the incomplete reminder was not followed by interference. So this speaks for a labelization of the memory trace during wakefulness by the incomplete reminder. And these labile memory traces can then be disrupted by interference. So this is basically a proof of concept study showing that during wakefulness, only the incomplete reminder labelizes the memory, but not the complete reminder. So in the next study that we did, we were interested what would happen if we present these different reminder cues during sleep. So our idea was that labelization during wakefulness would reminders that induce labelization during wakefulness should also induce labelization and a subsequent stabilization during sleep. So the difference that we had observed for the sleep consolidation and reactivation studies. So what we did in the next study was 3 different experiments. So in the first experiment, we trained the subjects in the evening. So again, it was the same paradigm, like the sounds and the words. And then our subjects were allowed to sleep. And again, here we had only the short sleep period, like 40 minutes. And then during sleep, we presented either the incomplete reminder or the complete reminder, or as a control condition, we had 1 group of subjects with no reminder. And then again, they were awakened and they had to learn the interference task, and then they were tested. And what we found was really interesting. So you can see here, in the no reminder condition, there was significant forgetting. But in both reminder conditions, the complete and the incomplete reminder condition, there was less forgetting, basically no forgetting, and significantly better memory performance than in the no reminder condition. So this was really surprising for us. The first thing is the reminder actually stabilized the memory in comparison to a labelization during wakefulness. So this is a replication of our first sleep and wakefulness study. But we would have expected that only the incomplete reminder induces this stabilization, but not the complete reminder. So this was surprising. So we thought that maybe this depends on the time duration, maybe because in the reconsolidation experiments, we typically have much longer time intervals, like learning on day 1, reactivation and interference on day 2, testing on day 3. And here we have the whole process within a few hours. So we did another experiment where we had a longer retention period. Again, we had the training in the evening, then the subjects were allowed to sleep and they received one of the 2 reminders or no reminder, but then they were allowed to continue sleeping for the whole night. And then they were awakened in the morning and they were tested on interference and the original memory. And now we saw a different pattern. Again, the no reactivation group had significant forgetting, and the incomplete reminder condition had almost no forgetting, so significantly better memory than the no reactivation condition. But this time there was no improvement for the complete reminder condition. So the complete reminder condition was comparable to the no reminder group and significantly worse than the incomplete reminder. So this is actually what we had expected, that only the incomplete reminder induces memory stabilization. And then finally, in a third experiment, we asked whether this was actually an effect that depended on sleep, because subjects were allowed to continue sleeping after the reactivation, but it's also possible that it's just a simple time effect. So we did another experiment where we had the same training, the same sleep period with the reminders or no reminder, and then the subjects were awakened and they stayed awake for the rest of the night and had the interference and the testing in the next morning. And when we look at the results, we see exactly the same effect as after the 8-hour sleep experiment. So only the incomplete reminder stabilized the memory, but the complete reminder did not. So what we can take from this experiment is that both reminders stabilize memory on the short term, so for about 40 minutes, but only the incomplete reminder stabilizes the memory on the long term as well. And this effect is not specific for sleep, so it seems to be a time effect. It also occurs if the subjects stay awake during the rest of the night. And to look at the underlying mechanisms, we did time frequency analysis. Here you can see the evoked potential following the cue. So this is the onset of the sound, and then here it's the onset of the word, or in the incomplete reminder condition, the syllable. And you can see a pronounced evoked response in response to the cues or the word or the syllable. And what we also typically see in other studies, we see a strong theta response here after about 0.5 to 1 second, and a very strong spindle response after about 1 to 2 seconds. And that we see in both conditions, complete reminder and incomplete reminder condition. And when we compare the two conditions, there was only one significant cluster, which was here after 1 to 2 seconds in the slow spindle frequency range. And this means that there's more slow spindle power in the complete reminder condition. So after the presentation of the complete reminder compared to the incomplete reminder. And we believe that this suggests that there are actually different processes for the complete and the incomplete reminder. And maybe the stronger spindle response in the complete reminder condition is due to a more complex processing of the complete reminder because it has more semantic meaning, it is a longer word. So this might suggest that the incomplete reminder is processed to a lesser extent during sleep, possibly inducing something like a prediction error or a mismatch, which then induces memory labelization and subsequent stabilization. We also checked for correlations with different sleep parameters, for example, with the amount of slow wave sleep, slow oscillations, delta power, and spindle power. And we found that the memory performance was actually associated with the amount of slow wave sleep. So more slow wave sleep was associated with better memory performance. And also better memory performance was associated with higher slow oscillation power, higher delta power, and also higher spindle power. And interestingly, all of these correlations were only observed in the no reminder condition, but not in the reminder conditions. And this is really interesting because it suggests that it kind of relates to the study that I've shown you earlier, that sleep that sleep reactivation accelerates reactivation processes during sleep and the consolidation of memory, so that these spontaneous consolidation processes that are probably underlying memory consolidation in the no reminder condition are no longer as important in the reactivation condition, in the reminder condition, because the reminders might override these spontaneous natural processes and accelerate and speed up these processes. So to summarize these findings, I've shown you that sleep facilitates memory consolidation and preferentially those memories that are relevant for the future. This relies on memory reactivation, the replay during sleep. And this can also be manipulated externally with targeted memory reactivation, for example, with odors or sounds. This speeds up consolidation processes, and it is specific for the reactivated content. And we also saw that there are different effects of memory reactivation during wakefulness, leading to a labelization, and memory reactivation during sleep, leading to an immediate stabilization of the memory. And there are also different effects of different reminder types, incomplete and complete reminders. So both reminders induce a short-term stabilization, but only the incomplete reminder induces long-term stabilization during sleep. So with this, I would like to thank my collaborators, especially Cecilia Forcato, of course. And yeah, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Susanne. We are now open to questions for everyone. You can raise your hand and open your mic if you want. I have a question. I don't know how to confirm the question, but it seems to me that in one of your experiments, the memory performance dropped because of some kind of interference problem during the reconsolidation. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if that is because what you are seeing is a forgetting process that someone can believe that is from interference or from actual forgetting. No, but I was thinking if that interference or that forgetting is that the interference is being like added to the memory that is consolidated, reconsolidate. I don't know if I'm clear what I'm saying. If you are like adding something to the memory that it is now labile, and that is causing the interference at the evocation state.
Yeah, you mean like the new part, for example, becomes incorporated into the previous, or becomes a both memory traces might compete for retrieval. Yes. Yeah, that's a very good question. And of course, these are two different processes. If it would be forgetting, it would be a passive process. And this interference would be more like an active process. I believe that in our case, because the retention interval was rather short, it is probably more an updating process. And like you suggested, that there are new memory traces that are that compete for the older ones. There are, on the other hand, also studies showing that there might be an actual overwriting of the original memory trace. So when you labelize the original memory trace and then new information comes in, the original memory trace is actually erased and the new it is replaced with a new one. Yeah, there's a whole literature on this question, and with our studies we cannot really disentangle the two options. Yeah, I don't really know. It's an interesting question. Yeah.
Thank you. We have 3 raised hands. Caroline, would you like to ask your question? Your mic is.
Your mic, yes. We still can't hear you. Yes, no.
Oh, no.
Now you're muted again.
There, we got it in the end. Apologies, I was trying to put in the chat that the host needed to give me access to unmute, but I realised I wasn't communicating that with apologies. Thank you for your presentation, Susanne. I really enjoyed it. I might risk putting 2 and 2 together and making 63, but I'd be really interested in your thoughts on this. So your evidence seems really clear in demonstrating, benefits of sleep on consolidation, but also that the more holistic the cue, the more, I guess, episodic the nature of the reactivation during sleep, and perhaps the benefit of episodic memory. But what we find when we wake people up during sleep and during slow wave sleep, as well as REM, is that if we ask people to talk about their mental content, what they are thinking or dreaming of, then those memories are much more fragmentary. And I just wondered what your thoughts might be on that. I mean, I guess one idea is that memory reactivations during sleep are nothing to do with dreaming. But I would be quite keen to hear your thoughts as to whether you think there's any relationship there.
That's a really interesting question. Yeah, Personally, I believe that memory reactivation might have something to do with dream contents. There are no good studies so far on this question. It's hard to test, but I believe it's difficult to study because of the different phenomenological nature of the events. Probably, like you've seen, the replay events during sleep they're not identical to the learning experience, and second, they are much faster. So upon awakening, when we recall the mental content from dreams, we probably adapt these events to our normal waking life experience. And I'm not sure what that makes with the original replay activity during sleep. So it's really hard to test. But I do think that it has to do something with memory reactivation. There is one study from a colleague of mine that is not published yet, so it's personal communication, but she tried to detect memory content of the dream experience from the reactivation events during sleep. And this seems to work, at least in a rudimentary form, at least significantly. So there seems to be some information in the neuronal processes that are related to the phenomenological memory content from the dreams.
Thanks.
Hard to study this topic, yeah, but really interesting.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks for the impressive talk. I have two questions. The first question is regarding the reconsolidation study, because I found out in your study, it seems like the interference task is always the post-sleep, right? But normally in previous study, you showed that when you reactivated the memory, the memory returned to the bio state, which we can manipulate the memory, but it has a very critical time window for the like a new learning and for the reconsolidation. I'm wondering whether the after the sleep, when you're doing the interference task, it is still the reconsolidation or something else. Yeah. The second question is since you have found the different effects for the complete queue versus incomplete queue during the TMR task, I'm wondering whether this effect is somehow related to the testing effect, what has been well established in the awake memory study. Because in the awake memory study, they found that when people restudy the queue and associative pairs, they found that the memory effect is worse than the testing effect when you only present the queue, right? So I'm thinking whether there are somehow maybe similar neural mechanisms underlying this testing effect and the incomplete queue beneficial effect.
Those are two very interesting questions. Yeah. Maybe on the testing effect first. I never thought about it. That's a really interesting point. But you're right, additional learning is usually worse than additional testing. I wonder whether in our study we actually we can consider our protocol as a testing session, because the subjects never actively recalled anything. But you might argue that presenting the incomplete cue triggers some kind of unconscious recall or an automatic completion of the association. So yeah, that's a very interesting alternative explanation. Yeah. And what was your first question? I'm sorry.
Oh, the reconsolidation. So I found that.
Oh yes, when you wake up. Yeah. Yes, that is something that we thought about a lot. And so we tried to make the time period between awakening and interference very short. So the subjects were awakened. We basically placed them in front of the computer and started the interference immediately. But still, you could argue that the process of waking up or something that happens in this process very quickly restabilizes the memories, and it's not really the reconsolidation. So in another follow-up study, we actually tried to induce the interference during sleep. So subjects learned something on day 1, and then on day 2, they learned something new, and then they went to sleep. So we thought that the new memory content would be consolidated during sleep, and then during sleep, we reactivated the old content from the day before. So we thought that this would introduce interference directly during sleep, during the labelization period. But that actually didn't work. So there was no effect. But that's a problem, yes.
So have you ever tried to introduce like after you delivering an TMRQ, have you ever tried to like applying some new stimuli, like a new sound for immediately following the TMRQ?
We didn't do that, but there's another study by the group from Björn Rasch and Thomas Schreiner that tried something like that. So they presented a reactivation cue and another sound after that, or another associated word, and that disrupted the memory consolidation, actually. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have a question from Tao. You want to ask? You wanted to ask?
Actually, my question already be asked by Jane, and I think, yeah, I same with Jane. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, maybe if someone want to ask one more question.
There's a Padlet question.
Okay.
Or is there? Sorry, Marina, were you pointing to something else?
No, I was just saying that Perrine Ruby wrote in the discussion here. If you could show again the conclusion slide. But yes, but maybe Melanie, you can just read the question on the Padlet.
Adriana, did you want to ask your Padlet question, or should I ask it, or?
Well, it was quite similar to what Caroline raised, which was about like, well, in case you have some insights, Susanne. So I was just asking whether there's any correlation between the content of dreaming and the cues that you're presenting. But it was kind of like, you just say that you haven't studied that, but yeah, well, you have had some like insights by asking the participants, but then like kind of like, my thoughts there was like, if it's the case, like you're applying a cue and then the person is dreaming about the cue, then it's like whether that would be a case of memory consolidation or will be a case of perception, no? Because it can be that you're dreaming about that cue because that's what you're perceiving at that moment. So, but yes.
I had a Padlet question as well. I'm sorry.
No, ask your question.
Yeah, so mine was about the imperfect input blockade between real stimulus and, well, dream reporting at least. So, of course, stimulus does get registered by the conscious dreaming mind at times, and other times it doesn't. And that's been referred to as an input blockade. But I was just curious if this blockade, at what stage of processing it's likely to happen. So it seems like it's you get very reliable responses from the brain, at least during non-dreaming sleep and dreaming sleep. And if there are times when the brain is shut off from stimulus, or whether that's a blockade somewhere that happens pre-conscious, so the brain registers stimulus, but then it's not made aware to the dreaming subject.
Yeah. There are actually studies on that question, and there's one clear phenomenon that is related to this blockade, which is sleep spindles. So during sleep spindles, so the sleep spindles are of rather short duration, like half a second to 1 second. And during that time, external input is not going through the thalamus to the neocortical processing regions. So these spindles basically block the processing. And this might be related to memory reactivation, because memory reactivation events take place during spindles mostly. So the spindles might shield the memory reactivation from any external input, so that these reactivated events are not disturbed by external input. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I don't know if Perrine Ruby has a question. There is someone just raised the hand, and I think it's going to be the last question because we have to make the break and then continue with the Remington. So Etty, you have a question?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I wanted to ask, what do you think that there is this interaction between the interference and the incomplete cue? How perhaps there's something about the interference and the incomplete cue that allows for an association to be somewhat wider, and then the interference doesn't block it completely? Do you think it's something like that?
So we introduced the interference to.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Oh, I think you're lost. That's unfortunate.
Oh, okay, I can hear you now. Sorry.
Okay, you're still there. And so, yes, so we introduced the interference to make the stabilization effect visible, basically, because without the interference, it might be there, but it might not be observable in performance. So that was the main reason why we introduced the interference. But of course, we don't really know if this interference interacts in some way with the memory trace per se. Yeah.
Yeah, but do you think that there is a reason the incomplete cue is more beneficial in the face of interaction than the complete cue?
Yes. So actually, we believe that the incomplete cue induces some kind of prediction error or some kind of mismatch. So at least that's what we know from the reconsolidation theory. And we also know that prediction errors are at least rudimentarily also processed during sleep. And we believe that this might in some way trigger the reactivation process because it signals the brain that there's something unexpected, which is relates to the selectivity that I've shown you. So there's something that seems to be important. And it seems to be worthy to consolidate this memory. So we believe that this is the underlying mechanism.
I see. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Susanne Diekelmann, for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
And to all the questions that people asked. And now we are going to have a very short break. Maybe we say until like 3 minutes.
Welcome back, everyone, to the second session. It seems like everyone is slowly coming back, so I will introduce the next speaker. I'll also be fielding the questions at the end. So now we're having Dr. Remington Mallett as the second speaker of the session, and he's a postdoctoral research fellow at Northwestern University, studying dreams. And his talk today is going to be about the cognitive emotional trajectory of lucid dream experiences.
You know, let me screen share, Melanie.
We have to make you go.
Nah.
Yeah.
I can try without.
No, I think it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So now you're a co-host. It should work.
How is that?
Looks good.
Cool. All right, cool. So thanks a lot. I'm super excited to talk about this work. And of course, it's a privilege to be talking along with all these people here. I'm particularly excited to talk about this work because I am just kind of starting to string all of this work together that I've presented in isolation before, but I'm really interested in to hear people's feedback on this. In particular, at the end is a couple of things I'm sort of prepping for publication, and so I'm interested to hear of what people think about this work. So I'm going to talk about dreams, lucidity, and morning mood, and how these all interact with each other. So this ceaseless cycle of sleep and wake here is where we're going to start. So these things interact with each other constantly. We know that sleep quality impacts your waking experience. This is often, get good sleep, and we know that this is going to impact how we feel while we're awake. And waking experience is also going to impact your sleep quality. So what you do during the day impacts what you go through at night. And when people say get good sleep, what are they talking about? Often they're talking about things like total time in bed, go to bed at a reasonable hour, get up at a reasonable hour, the length of time that you sleep, don't oversleep, don't undersleep. And then a little more modern approach is to look at different sleep stages. So are you getting enough N2 sleep? Are you getting enough REM sleep? And while we may not have thought about this at home that much, now you have all these apps that tell you whether you're doing this right or wrong. And then we can talk about the number of naps and number of awakenings. And these aren't out of nowhere. This is the National Sleep Foundation's recommendations from 2017. These are the parameters that they recommend sleep quality based on. And so what do we think about in the inverse when we think about how waking experience is going to impact your sleep quality? Here we're thinking of things like stress. If you have trauma, it's definitely going to impact whether the quality of your sleep. It might be harder to fall asleep when you're excited. It's harder to fall asleep when you're anxious. You might be falling asleep and you ruminate on these negative memories. And so it prevents your ability to fall asleep. What I want to highlight here is that these things on the left, these are mostly have to do with experience while you're awake. So these are kind of like phenomenological things. It feels like something to be stressed and excited and anxious. And these are all things that you go through and as part of the psychological aspect of being awake. But over on the right here, none of these have to do with sleep psychology. And these are all just kind of objective measurement parameters of whether you're kind of, some of them are physiological and some of them are even more boring, which is like, are you going to sleep or waking up at the right time? But of course, there is an experience during sleep, and you experience things all night, and there is a phenomenology of sleep. And so what I'm going to kind of ask here is there some psychological component to sleep quality? And coming off the last talk is perfect, right? Memory reactivation, which I'm not going to talk about a whole lot here, is something that's going on during sleep. And then you have all these dreams, whether you recall them or not, these are experiences that you go through. So we're going to hone in on the interaction here, where what I'm really interested in is what happens from sleep to wake. So the experiences that you go through and affect your waking life. So you can have some cool dreams, right? You could dream about surfing and winning the surfing competition and falling in love, whichever one of these things is kind of your thing. You can have these positive experiences during sleep. You might also have some bad dreams, right? You might have your irrational fear of bats might crop up whenever you go to sleep. Maybe you have a weird alien abduction sleep paralysis experience. Or maybe you dream that the law has finally caught up with you. And only then when you wake up, do you realize that you're all good. So my point is that a multitude of memories are being reactivated during sleep. Some of these might be experienced as dream content, and others are not going to be experienced as dream content. And even a further subset of those are going to be recalled dreams, and others won't. But regardless, these are all psychological phenomena that are occurring while you're sleeping, and that the underlying neural processes that express these experiences during wake are reinstated. So my point here is that the brain doesn't really care whether you're dreaming or not, right? A stressful experience during a dream is a stressful experience, and you don't think, oh, well, that was just a dream, and it's not until you wake up. So these experiences are very real while you're dreaming. So why would psychological components not be an aspect of sleep quality? Well, I think it's kind of a new thing that sleep is no longer a black box. This is kind of a new, we have a new increased understanding of sleep, which is why we're all here talking about it. And it's only now that we can measure and manipulate the psychological content of sleep as well as we can. There's new measurement approaches, neural decoding, or you can decode the memory reactivation. A lot of that stuff is, the whole premise of that is that you are training your algorithms on waking experience and then testing it on sleep. So the very fact that you can measure memory reactivation during sleep is evidence of this. There's two-way dream communication, which I'll talk about in a second, and then text analytics, which is going to be a big part of my talk, which is to say that we can now extract a lot more data out of dream reports than we could in the past. And then there's new manipulation approaches, like we just heard about, targeted memory reactivation. You can entrain slow waves with audio, and there's a whole subset of field of dream engineering where there's all kinds of promising approaches to manipulate sleep. So just a couple examples here of this. Memory reactivation during sleep can be biased towards specific memories. Thankfully, you're just getting one slide of this because you just heard about it for an hour. So I don't have to do too much setup here, just to say that when people do, when you ask people to solve some creative task, and then they go to sleep, and if you replay some tone that you've paired with that task, they perform better on that the next day. So than the people that were not cued. So here above 0 on the y-axis means that the people that were cued performed better. And so the point of this is twofold. One is that memories are being reactivated during sleep, presumably spontaneously. So there is this psychological component of sleep, and then also that we can do something about it, that we can choose which memories we want to reactivate. And another cool thing is this two-way communication, which might bypass this pesky dream report, where you might not trust people waking up and talking about what they went through, so you can maybe just have them report that on the spot. And so the setup here is that the experimenter has the participant go to sleep, and then you hook up all the standard PSG to the participant, scalp electrodes, and so forth. You also give them some external stimulation, and so some sensory cue setups. And so when they go to sleep, while they remain asleep, you give them some signals, and then they tell you whether they're processing that or not. And so what this looks like here is the brain data in blue is showing you that this person is asleep indeed. And then the experimenter will give them some cues. And this example is your light stimulation, where they ask them to do this math problem at 4-0. And then they can respond out with eye movements, all while being asleep, telling you what's going on. So this is all to kind of say that the black box of sleep, there's a new view of sleep, and that we can now get some more insight into what's going on, into the phenomenology of sleep. So why am I going to focus on the influence of dreams if I'm saying that memory reactivation and dreams both are psychological components of sleep? Well, one is because Susanne just talked about it, and that kind of covered the ground. But actually, there's strong existing ties between dreams and emotions. And so there's reason to go down this path. And this quote, dreams, they feel real while we're in them. Probably the most pulled quote from Inception. And it doesn't even really have to do with lucid dreaming here. This is what I was talking about before about the brain doesn't really care whether you're awake or asleep. So I think that if there's an influence of our sleep phenomenology carried into waking, it's going to be these really intense feelings that feel very real while they're being experienced. Also, dream reports provide really, really rich phenomenological data. I think previously, you might not have been able to extract as much information because of all the manual coding involved. But again, we have a lot of methods to get around that now. And now, of course, I'll mention the caveats, especially to preface Melanie attacking me for cooking dream reports, that it's going to be memory for the event might be a little bit poor. So we don't know if we can trust them completely, right? And another thing is that the content can be highly variable across individuals. I think dreams are noisy, that's for sure. But I think that what they provide us, which is this very data. So we also don't have to be as targeted about report X, report Y. When they report the whole experience, we can explore a lot more aspects there. So I think that they're really useful. Why focus on the influence of lucid dreams in particular? These also have lots of qualitative support for their connection to well-being, lots of survey data and lots of books and stuff have been published about about lucid dreams leading to better waking well-being. And also they can be induced. If I want to know, if I'm interested in whether something impacts the waking mood, I would like it to be something that I can do something about, and I know that we can induce lucid dreams, so it seems useful. So I'm going to talk about two things. One is that dream mood contributes to waking mood, and I'm going to talk about what I think is the process from lucid dream to positive waking mood. And I'm just going to kind of split this into two halves. So first, the relationship between dream and waking mood. So does dream mood impact your waking mood? Well, we know that wake experience impacts dream experience, which is the inverse of this. This is way well more studied. This is kind of continuity hypothesis stuff. And I think that Michael Schradl has come up with increasingly creative ways to provide evidence for this. The latest is that if you have a cat, you dream about cats. And so if you have a cat, you have about 12% of your dreams have cats in them. If you used to have a cat, about 5%. And if you never had a cat, you're not really going to have any cat dreams. But the inverse of that, which is what I'm more interested in, is this dream experience then impact your waking experience. And here we're not going to look at cats because we're going to look at mood, right? Because the content is less relevant here. You don't think that if you dream about a cat, you're going to come across a cat tomorrow. That's not really the logic that we're working with. But it might be more of a mood influence, where if I am angry, then I wake up, I'm angry in my dream, I can wake up angry. That makes a little bit of sense. So if you ask people, does your dream mood impact your waking mood? If you just ask them that question, do you think so? Then people, almost everybody says yes, that they at least subjectively feel like that's the case. Another point of evidence for this is that for nightmare sufferers, the day after their nightmares they're worse on mental health. So they're filled with anxiety and lower on other mental health measures. So for frequent nightmare sufferers, they're not having nightmares every night. When they do, they have a worse day. And then self-reported dream and morning emotions are correlated. If you wake people up and ask them how they felt in their dream and how they felt in the morning, those two things are connected. So we asked this question by running a longitudinal sleep and wake diary study, where people woke up and we asked them to describe their entire dream. And then we also asked them some Likert scale questions, a subset of those which were related to emotion and how positive were your emotions while dreaming and how positive are your current emotions. And so if we don't focus on the dream report yet, even though that's where I think the powerful stuff is, we're going to just look at the Likert scale questions. And if we have dream emotion here, where 9 is higher positive mood and 9 is higher wake mood here, these things are very correlated, highly correlated, and the same is true for negative emotions. So again, explicit ratings of dream and wake emotion are highly correlated. But you might not really like this because these two things are tough to disentangle. If you wake somebody up and you say, hey, how did you feel in your dream and how do you feel right now at the same time, then even if somebody wants to, it might be hard to kind of separate those two moods, those two emotions. And so it just might be kind of a response bias. So what we're going to do is apply text analyses to these dream reports, which what I think is still imperfect, but a much more objective measure of dream mood. And so what we're going to do here is use Luke, which is a dictionary-based approach to text analysis. There's a bunch of ways to approach these text analyses, and we're going to focus on Luke for my talk. So I'm going to spend, this is for 2 projects, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about what this is. Luke has all of these different word categories, like anxiety words, that psychologists have spent lots of time validating. And so they build these, this is kind of the special sauce of Luke, is that it has these psychologically validated dictionaries. They do lots of ratings and semantic similarity scores to get these words together. And so anxiety words might be afraid, alarmed, anxious, and ashamed. These are just the first ones in alphabetical order from this category. And then there's also different word categories, like social. You can look at social words, you can look at anxiety words, you can look at anger words, and all these different things. So how this might look in practice is that you might have this dream report. I was in a wide open field with bright, bold grass on flat green hills, like a digital place. Everything had a surface mesh made by triangles. I was astounded by it. You might pump that into Luke, and Luke does its magic, and it says, okay, we found 2 positive emotion words. Let's divide that by the total amount of words, and we're just going to multiply by 100 to get a percentage to make it a little more easy to digest in our brains. And we're going to say that's 6% positive emotion in that dream report. So now you apply this to a bunch of different dream reports, and you see if some subset of your dreams have more or less emotion. It's objective, and it's applicable to large data sets. There's no manual intervention other than minor cleanup and things like that, which is what makes this particularly useful. Also, Luke has a huge existing literature in psychological research. Luke in social psychology is a big deal. So there's a lot of backing and reason to trust this program. And it's been applied to dream reports a lot before. This whole kind of idea of applying text analytics to dreams is kind of a booming thing, I think. And so this is a recent review paper from this year, which is a really good summary of these concepts and what's been done and all the different ways besides Luke that you can approach dream analysis. So you're into this thing, I'd suggest it. So what does this look like when we did it? So we applied this to those dream reports, and we might look at all of the different word categories that have to do with affect. And so here we're going to present a mixed effects regression model. So I'm presenting here anything above 0 is going to mean that this category predicted a more negative morning mood, and anything less than 0 is going to be a more positive mood. And so if I look at the amount of anxiety that's represented in these dream reports by word counts, then I find that if there's more anxiety in the dream report, then they wake up feeling worse in the morning. We don't find any effects of anger and sadness, but in the inverse for positive emotion, the more that somebody represents positive emotion in the dream, and by dream report, then the better they feel in the morning. And the cool thing about this is that you can then also get away from strictly emotion, and you can say, well, what are the topics that people dream about? And does that make them feel better or worse in the morning? And so if people dream about death picked up on via these word searches, then we find that when people dream about death, they do feel worse in the morning. And when people dream about leisurely activities and a smaller effect of money, dream about money, and you will be happy when you wake up. So my point here is that emotional tone of dreams is still predictive of morning mood, and so is the topical content of dreams. And then I'm not presenting it here, but we talk about it in the paper. We run some additional models that account for the sleep, just kind of classic self-reported sleep quality, like how long they were in bed and sleep efficiency and things like that. And these effects hold after we account for those things, which I think is an important part. So another approach to this question might be, how do different types of dreams influence mood? There's different types of dreams that we experience. Nightmares, I mentioned this before, the nightmares do have a negative influence on your morning mood. And then there's these big dreams, which is kind of a little bit more of an abstract or vague concept, but these are dreams that people are particularly memorable or impactful, and often do have kind of provide people with kind of transformative views the next day. And then what about these lucid dreams? So lucid dreams are being aware of the dream as it occurs. It's much more, when we think of dreams, we think about waking up from sleep, and then we think, oh, wow, that was a dream. That was a wild dream, X, Y, and Z happened. But in this case, you're gonna realize that while the dream is still going on, it's kind of a wild experience. So these numbers actually kind of surprised me. So about 50% of people have had at least one lucid dream. And about 25% of people have the monthly. I had a hard time with these because I was like, it subjectively, it doesn't feel like that, but then you kind of think about it and then you go, well, I don't really know what other people dream about because we don't really talk about dreams that much culturally. So when I say, well, I had my first lucid dream and I thought, wow, I bet that nobody's having those experiences, but I don't know why. It's not that people are telling me about their non-lucids all the time. So this is a really, this is a meta-analysis I'm referencing here that I think does a good job of accounting for it. There is a lot of variation in these survey studies. One of the biggest caveats being that people often will give the surveys to dream enthusiasts, but this meta-analysis accounts for these things. And so I think that these are where the numbers land in terms of lucid dreams in the population. And lucid dreams are observed in a lab. You might have been skeptical about these for a while. People were thinking that there were maybe kind of false awakenings or sleep paralysis, but if you were a skeptic, your time is up because there's evidence of it in the lab. As an example, I was on my phone reading, then I realized that my phone wasn't actually on. I was like, wait, maybe this is a dream because now I noticed the screen was off. Then I noticed the experimenter sleeping on the floor in the room. I reality checked and air came through my nose, so I knew I was dreaming. Then I remember my signals. So what are these signals? This is what the signals look like typically in the lab, which is where, again, you have brain data in blue here, and these eye signals are where somebody's indicating that they're asleep and lucid while they're still dreaming. And then, not as pertinent to the immediate conversation, but this is another example of this two-way communication where the researchers will give them some math problems and they can continue to respond. So here they're just saying I'm lucid, and then they're kind of continuing on and having this conversation with the experimenter. So what we've been doing is some longitudinal lucid dream induction diary studies where we give people tasks at home to perform and test if they are inducing lucid dreams and how that's impacting their general dream habits and their sleep quality and their mood and all these things. So these are typically kind of like reality checks and other kind of like cognitive behavioral approaches to inducing lucid dreams that tend to work if you give people enough time to work through them. And so here I'm just going to focus on the mood aspects of these studies. There's other details that are in these references here. But here again on the y-axis is going to be higher is going to be better mood, and worse mood is going down. And so if we just take the mornings that people have had a lucid dream, they wake up from a lucid dream and they don't wake up from a lucid dream, we see that they feel better when they wake up from a lucid dream. They report feeling better after lucidity. So here we're not asking them to report dream mood or anything. We're just saying, did you have a lucid dream and how do you feel? And importantly, they're not reporting any changes in subjective sleep quality in the sense that this is the sort of time, the measures I was talking about before, like sleep efficiency and time to wake and things like that. So here, this is kind of a big deal. There's a lot of concerns about lucid dreaming. I think rightfully so. There's a lot of concerns about lucid dreams disrupting sleep quality, like sleep length and things like that. And so it's important, I think, to account for these things. That not over-interpreting the null, but there's a lot of papers recently showing null effects on sleep quality. I do think that lucid dreaming has a negative impact on sleep quality. I'll talk about that in my next project here, but at least here they're not reporting that it does. And so in a whole different data set, we asked people we were focusing here on lucidity on a continuous scale. So instead of just asking people if they were lucid or not, we asked them to report their degree of lucidity. And when we correlate with that, with their positive morning affect here, we also find that's correlated. So the more lucid they are at night, the better they feel in the morning. Lucid dreams are consistently leading to positive morning. So we might ask, okay, now we can have a little bit better a picture of what about sleep phenomenology is leading to this happy dancing waking person or this very not happy dancing waking person. What can make you just kind of a bland person here in the day? Well, the emotional tone and the topical content of your dreams is predicting morning mood here. So happy and surfing leads you to a positive morning mood, and anxious and dreaming about death topics, it's not as good. And I'm putting an asterisk here just to remind myself this to highlight the caveat that this is morning mood, and we aren't asking about mood throughout the day. So this is one sample in the morning. We'd love to run those studies. They're just a little bit more invasive. People will have to do experience sampling throughout the day. But I'm super interested in those effects too. We also know now that insight into the dream state seems to be predicting morning mood as well, in that people are having more positive morning mood after they have insight into the dream state or lucid. And both of these effects are holding after we're controlling for these classic measures of sleep quality. So I'm arguing here, I hope it's somewhat convincing that dreams are a component of sleep quality that we might account for. So if we did add dream content to this list of sleep quality, then what might a recommendation look like? These are just kind of things that we can ask. So what might we suggest for topics of dreams? And like I said, dreaming about positive experiences is maybe better. Does the dream have to be recalled? I'm not addressing that question here, but it's an important one. It's of course tough to get at. Maybe the two-way communication method can address this question, but right now it's not clear whether the dream has to be recalled. I don't think that it does, but it could be that the memory for the event, I think that would make sense too. When you recall positive memories in general, that brings back positive experience. It could be just a recall exactly. And so this will be tough to disentangle, but it's important. And then an important question to ask is, would we be interrupting an otherwise critical function of dreams? If we were to suggest that you dream about a certain topic, then are we interrupting some ongoing memory or otherwise important process about dreams? I think that the jury's out on whether that's true or not, but it's definitely something that we need to understand better. So that is the evidence I'll provide for dream mood contributing to waking mood. And now I want to talk about this potential progression that going from lucid dream to positive waking mood. How is that happening? What explains that effect? So why would lucidity or being aware of a dream lead to positive mood? Well, it could be the inherent emotional content. It could be that lucid dreams are just inherently more positive. A lot of people describe these intense positive dreams from lucidity, these kind of like awe-inspiring lucid dreams. It could be that it's the control over the dream content that allows you to change things at will and make things in your dream the way that you want them to be. It could also be this aspect of success. So this is maybe a confound. It's a confound in a sense, but so there's this idea that maybe people are trying to have lucid dreams and it's often difficult to have them. And then once you do have one, when you wake up, you feel accomplished, like, oh, I finally accomplished this lucid dream that I've been searching for. And so this could be explained with some of the positive emotion. It's a compound, but it's not a bad thing, right? You're still feeling good in the morning. So, but that might explain this relationship. And then there's really interesting commentaries that I think have to bring up some really good points about are there negative consequences of lucid dreaming? Is it always good to go for lucid dream induction, or are there some reasons to avoid it? And surely it's not a perfect system, and so it's important to consider these. And we're trying to do that. So what is the specific route from lucid dream to positive morning mood is what I'll ask. And so to answer this question, we went to the lucid dreaming subreddit. So Reddit is a huge website. It's like one of the most top 10 visited sites or something like that. So if you're not familiar, Reddit it's a kind of a huge social media site with a bunch of different targeted forums. And so if you want to talk with random people on the internet about basketball, then you go to the basketball subreddit. And if you want to talk to people about chess, then you go to the chess subreddit. And if you want to talk about lucid dreaming, you go to the lucid dreaming subreddit. And the reason that we kind of went for this data set is because people go to this lucid dreaming subreddit to talk about all things surrounding the topic of lucid dreaming, and not just lucid dreaming experiences themselves. So this is not just I had a lucid dream and this is what happened, but a lot of the potential negative issues are not about the lucid dreaming experiences exactly, but they're kind of like losing sleep and things like that. So we thought we'd catch some of that stuff here. And so this is just kind of showing how popular the site is. This is the number of posts over time over the last, since about 2010. This is as far back as the posts go. So on average, there's about 1,000 posts per month here. You can see that the site was kind of born in the middle of 2010. This is when Inception came out, mind you, is when things started crawling up. And then a big boom in 2012. And then there's a spike in 2020. I'm pretty sure that any subreddit's going to have a spike in 2020 when everybody just kind of jumped onto the internet in March of 2020 for some reason. So just some examples that I pulled out from here. Then I started to realize I was in a dream. Then I took all the control and did everything I wanted. And we're pulling excerpts from posts here. I eventually gained the ability to recognize nightmares, and I could wake myself up. Now I just don't get nightmares anymore. So hey, that worked out well. So these are examples of some really positive experiences that people have had and are sharing on the site. And then there's some negative experiences too. At first, I attempted the mild technique, which is an induction method, and woke up in the middle of the night. I had become discouraged and couldn't fall back to sleep. So it's kind of some sleep loss that doesn't have to do with the lucid experience, but it's surrounding the issue of lucid dreaming. So I go to sleep and I'm aware I'm dreaming. So I try to alter it, but I fail, resulting in zombies and raptors, end up getting mauled, felt pain somehow. Wouldn't want that. So what this content analysis looks like is that the 3 human raters participated in this combination of inductive and deductive analysis, and we emphasized valence by looking specifically for positive and negative themes. What this looks like in practice is that we, as a group, develop positive and negative themes based on first existing literature. So we look in the lucid dreaming literature, we say, what are people saying that lucid dreams are used for, and what are they saying the problems are? Things we've already mentioned, like nightmare treatment as a positive, Creativity and insight is something that the literature says people use lucid dreaming for, from survey studies and so forth. And so we use those. And then we also, and then the sleep loss and things like that. We also go to the lucid dreaming subreddit then, and also try to explore that content and say, all right, well, what concepts are being represented here? What themes can we pick up on here that aren't expressed in the literature that we think are relevant? And so the reason we took this route is because we were kind of open to the idea that we don't know all that much about lucid dreaming experiences yet. There's probably a wide variety, and especially given the new interest in these negative experiences, we wanted to explore whether there's other negative aspects we weren't catching. And so then we all break up and we go to code a subset of these forum posts on our own. And then we meet back together, discuss and adjust these themes accordingly, according to the new data that we reviewed and things like that. And so this is a little bit of an iterative process where we meet and discuss and talk about whether there's new themes we need to bring in. So the results from this are that we found some positive themes like creativity and insight, and these are kind of literature-based things, and some of these were common on the subreddit. And nightmare resolution. Dream enhancement here is any time that lucid dreaming was used to make their dream content better, whether that's through control or through, sometimes people just had positive experiences as from the nature of being lucid, even without control, like they would just say that it was kind of an awe-inspiring experience. And then for negative themes, we picked up on there's lucid dysphoria or lucid nightmares, and then the issues of poor sleep. Sleep paralysis was super common. I'll just show the numbers here. Sleep paralysis was super common. Reality confusion, which is an important topic that has been brought up recently. That here includes false awakenings, where people are confused about whether they think that they've woken up, but then they haven't. And there's also a subset of cases that are where people are awake and they start to get a little bit confused about at least in the morning, about being awake or dreaming. And interestingly, this is a new one that we found, which is like, there's some people that were like, I have a lot of lucid dreams and I would rather I'd like to tone them down. And so I think that's a really interesting, important thing to follow up on. I don't have advice for people that ask that, or I would like to have some. And so, so these numbers here are kind of statistically similar. So the number of positive themes and the number of negative themes are close. But if we code these posts then on whether somebody attained lucidity or not, we can start to differentiate, well, what actually predicts whether a theme is going to, whether an experience with lucidity is going to be positive or negative. And here, if they attain lucidity, the way to interpret these graphs is the disproportionality of the squares. So here, it's showing that for posts that are positive, they're way more likely to have attained lucidity for posts that are positive. So this is indicating that once you're lucid, then you're much more likely to have a positive experience. And then we also rated these posts on dream control, whether they had high dream control or little to no dream control. And this is a huge effect where if people have dream control, then their lucid dreams are overwhelmingly positive experiences. And it's the majority of these no control lucid dreams where people are having these negative experiences. So I like this because you can kind of start to then put together a little bit of a process model of maybe how we can predict whether we're going to have these positive or negative experiences that as a result of attempting to induce lucid dreams. So you can imagine that you're trying to induce lucidity, and if you attain lucidity, you're more likely to go on to a positive experience. If you failed attempt, you're not guaranteed negative, but a failed attempt could lead to just poor sleep. You don't fall back to sleep. It could lead to sleep paralysis or things like that. And then once you get lucid, you're not totally in the clear yet. You would hope that you have high dream control in your experience. And then if you don't if you don't have dream control, it's more likely that you'll have a negative experience. But based on the results I showed you earlier about lucid dreaming often leading to a positive mood, I think that this is where you start to get these positive morning mood effects from once you get people lucid and they have dream control. So we're saying here that there are negative aspects surrounding lucid dreaming, and almost none of these negative experiences, though, are high control lucid dreams. And so if we're going to induce lucidity, we probably want to make sure we're inducing control with it and not just dream awareness. So what is it about control now, we can ask, that leads to this positive morning mood? And are lucid dreams themselves more positive? And if so, does positivity coincide with control, or is it an outcome of the ability to control the dream? That's a little wordy. Let me put that into diagrams, which is to say that there's two plausible alternatives here, where in one at the top, you're attaining lucidity and there's this simultaneous activation of high dream control and positive emotion. These things, one or the other or both, is leading to positive mood. Alternatively, you could have this much more linear process of you get lucid, you have high dream control. This allows you to increase positive emotion in your dream, and then this is leading to a good mood. So I think that we don't know this because we still don't really understand totally what it's like to have a lucid dream. There's so much variation in these experiences, and we don't know. The data on lucid dreams and the emotions in lucid dreams is mixed. Papers, sometimes people report more positive emotions, sometimes they're equal, and in some cases even negative or less than. Sometimes people describe these as vivid and awe-inspiring experiences, and sometimes they're horrific lucid nightmares, like we've shown in that data set before. I think Tadas would probably want me to say that these numbers are really small, and that was an emphasis in the paper, that these aren't high numbers, but they do happen, and so it's important to consider that they are out there. And there's various levels of control in lucid dreams, which is something we tried to highlight there, which is just that not all lucid dreams have this high control. And these are all can kind of help address this question of why hasn't, despite lucid dreaming therapy being in the AASM recommendations for nightmare treatment, it's not really clear that it's totally working. So we have kind of a weird situation. And so to answer this question, we looked at, went to Dream Views, which is a really big lucid dreaming blog where people can host public dream journals. People can host public or private dream journals. And for the ones that are public, we looked at this data. And this is another really big data set where there's almost 500 on average. So the site's kind of dying out. There's not many posts lately, but right around the middle of 2010, the site was born. So again, that's when Inception came out. It's kind of insane what Inception kind of did for lucid dreaming culture and science as a consequence. But to say this slow progression, you have almost like kind of 500 posts per month on this data set. And if I just plot on the right axis here, this same data in a cumulative distribution, here you can look at where this lands as the total amount of dreams in this data set. So this is close to 60,000 dreams that we're looking at here. And the really, really cool thing about this data set is that users have the option to label their dreams as lucid or non-lucid or a couple other categories. And so what I'm really interested in here is the ones where users have labeled their dreams as lucid or non-lucid, so we're just going to take these blue and orange subsets of the data here, where we have about 10,000 lucid dreams and then another kind of 30,000 non-lucid dreams. And if we just kind of take a glance at the text in this data set, we can look, I'll show you this whole thing here. So if we take a quick look at what kind of words people are using in lucid and non-lucid dreams, to the right are words that are more high in lucid dreams, and to the left are words that are higher in non-lucid dreams. Lucid dream, people are saying in their dream reports that they had a lucid dream. Flying, which is consistent with what we know about lucid dreams. Try, wake, hand. Hand is probably from people talking about reality checks, like trying to put their finger through their hand is a common thing. Think, decide, these are all kind of make sense with lucidity. So this is kind of validating that these labels that users provide are meaningful. And then the non-lucid dreams, friend, remember, school, these are all run. I think that these are as expected too, because these are kind of typical things that people dream about, which is kind of standard daily stuff. But we're going to get a little more targeted here. We're going to bring back Luke, and we're going to look at these specific word categories that we care about, which is insight is a Luke category that we're interested in. We're going to use this kind of as a proxy for lucidity, which is the examples in this word category are think, know, become, realize. I knew I was dreaming. I became lucid. I realized I was dreaming. These I find that this category really represents lucidity in this dream. Measuring control in text is a little bit weirder. It's kind of hard people often don't say I'm in control. They do sometimes here, but it's kind of hard you can't word search the word control, because you kind of have to get a feel in the text for what gives people a sense of agency. How do people talk when they have a sense of agency over their environments and things? And so we're using this category agency here, which has a lot of words like tried, able, goal, making, maybe things that language that people are using when they have a sense of ownership over their actions. And I found this to be really good for picking up on control. And then positive and negative emotion are words that you expect: happy, excited, play, and so forth. So again, to the right is going to be higher in lucid dreams. If we look at the total effect of insight here, it is higher in lucid dreams, way higher. But you might only be somewhat satisfied by this and saying, well, what words are driving this effect? So if we look at the individual words that contribute to this effective insight, we can see that they're using language like became, realized, thought, decided. I realized I was dreaming. I decided I was dreaming. I knew I was dreaming. I became lucid. I realized. So I think this is picking up on the high degree of lucidity in those posts. Agency is way higher in lucid dreams. I tried, thought, goal. I had a goal. I was thinking. I had intention. I think these words really well capture the sense of agency that's present in lucid dreams. Positive emotion had a smaller effect than I expected, and I'll explain on the next slide why I think that is the case. But words like calm and excitement and amazing that show up in lucid dreams, and then they are way less in negative emotion. So non-lucid dreams are way higher in negative emotion. Words like bad, kill, hate, angry, miss, defeat, cut, some really nasty stuff over there. So if I could have one of these dreams, I know which one I would have. I'd be having lucid dreams for sure. One caveat here is that these effects treat the whole dream report as one event. So like for the positive emotion effect, if we think that people are getting lucid in their bad dreams and making them good, if I look at the whole dream report as one, I was being chased, I ran up the stairs and I got away. Then I became lucid, or I ran up the stairs, I was being chased, I was really frightened. I became lucid, and I turned around and I told the person to go away, and I started to feel better. If I look at that whole dream, there's a lot of negative content in that dream, and it's maybe not going to be all positive. So there is a temporal progression that we might expect with lucid dreams. And so I want to see how these features unfold over time within the lucid dream. So now we're going to run a loop not just on the text as a whole, but we're just going to break the dream report up into little segments of text. And the only difference in the analysis really is that I just make the requirement that the dreams be longer because I need enough data in each little segment to look at. So if I look at the non-lucid progression and the positive emotion progression in non-lucid dreams, then you see it's relatively flat and there's a big spike at the end, which I'm not going to talk about, speculate on now, but I think it's definitely interesting to think about why there's a spike in positive emotion towards the end. It's important to consider that the end of a dream report might not be dream content and might be reflection on the dream. This is a caveat about the dream reports. What I think is so interesting is that if you look at the lucid trajectory, it matches with the non-lucid early on here. And it's only in the second half of the dream that lucid starts to diverge and become more positive. So if we look at this as a difference measure in between these two blue and orange lines, we see that positive emotion gets higher than in lucid dreams only towards the second half of the dream. And that if we look at agency and how this changes, it spikes way earlier. And so it's pretty, people have agency pretty consistently earlier, but it comes online way before this positive emotion. And this kind of matches with what we see in the negative, and this kind of matches with what we see in insight. So I'm arguing that these cognitive features peak before the largest changes in emotion. And then this kind of gives us, we can now kind of lean into one of these alternatives, which is that lucid dream control is offering this route to positive emotion. People get the control first, and then there's this positive emotion change in dream content. And that's maybe what is leading people to become lucid. And so now we can kind of update this model too, and we can say, all right, well, now we think that you need to get lucid. You need to, if you're attempting lucidity, you want to get lucid, you want to have our dream control, and then it's probably going to lead you to positive emotion and therefore. So that is it. That is the second, concluding the second half here, where dream control ensures a positive lucid experience, and it also prefaces positive dream changes. So if I want to throw this back into the context of sleep quality, for adding memory reactivation and dreams here, I didn't talk about memory reactivation, but if I wanted to talk about, but I think that dreams is just one way of getting at this question about how sleep phenomenology matters. And then these are the things that we said wake experience in waking life that influences your sleep quality. And I think that what I'm arguing here isn't really that weird, even because stress, trauma, fatigue, excitement, anxiety, these are all things you experience in your dreams. And so they're going to, the same way you experience them during wake, you experience them during your dreams, and those are going to impact how you feel. And then lucid dreaming might be recommended in some cases. It offers a route to control your dream experience, as one typically does your wake experience. When we say waking stress is bad for sleep, it's easy to tell people what to do. Well, avoid stressful activities and adjust your reactions. Lucid dreaming provides people the ability to respond how they want. You can't tell people to avoid stressful activities in their dreams unless they are have some control over that content. So this is just my acknowledgement slide. I want to thank the Penny Baker Language Lab at UT. This is where I got my PhD. I didn't study with them exactly, but I studied with Jared Lewis Peacock on working memory. But here, I met them there, and they were really helpful, and Ashwini in particular, in helping us get all these loop analyses going. And then Michelle Carr, who lets me collaborate on all her projects, and Karen and the rest of the lab at Northwestern have been really helpful on this stuff. And Laura, who is helped me a lot on the Reddit project, she's kind of co-running that Reddit project with me. And she, as I understand it, is looking for a PhD or master's program interested in these kinds of topics. So if anybody has any recommendations or anything, please let me know, and I'll forward that information to you. That's it.
A great talk, very interesting. So I will go straight into, we've got a few minutes for questions because we started a bit late. So if anyone has any questions, please put up your hands. Adriana is the first question.
Thank you, Remington. It was very interesting. Looking forward to read this latest article. So I was thinking about whether you have looked into the correlation between the attributes balance to your dream experience and the emotion that you had in the morning.
Did she just cut out for everybody or just me?
Yeah, she froze.
She's frozen.
Yeah.
Oh no. I'll just give her a second to see if she comes back. And then if not, I will put her question after Marina's.
I heard the compliment, and then I think she was gonna lean into
That's all she was gonna say.
So that's fine. Yeah, that's all. I got what I needed out of that. Yeah.
Okay. I will go to Marina, and then if she comes back, I will.
Okay. Yeah.
I think I have three questions, but there is Roru who just raised his hand or her hand, so okay, maybe she can start.
Hi everyone. No, maybe Marina can ask first, because my questions are not so related to the positive effect of lucid dream. It's about lucid dreams, but it's another thing. So you can start.
Oh. Anybody can ask a question.
Okay,
yeah.
So
I don't care. I just somebody asked. I would
okay,
like
Adriana,
can I ask?
Adriana, then Marina, then Roru. Just because no one's actually asked anything yet. Sorry, Adriana, could you please ask your question again, Adriana, because you got cut off.
Sorry about that. And I'm in the office of the university, so I thought the internet would be better here, but well, apparently not. Sorry about that. So I was asking whether you have looked into the correlation between the attribute balance to your experience, to your dream experience when you woke up. Because I'm thinking about like dreams in which maybe during the dream your experience was, well, your mood or emotion was positive. No, I'm thinking like very controversial cases, like you are dreaming that you are with someone else who's not your boyfriend or partner, and you're having a great experience, but then you wake up and then you feel bad because you are not meant to be dreaming about these sort of things, or any other cases like that. Things in terms of like you may feel bad in the morning, or you have like a bad emotion.
Yeah.
But that was for different reasons.
Yeah. I think that this exists for sure. It's reminding me of the more common case that I stumble across is that people have a really positive experience that they then they feel bad in the morning. I see this one a lot where it's like people say they like fell in love with somebody in their dream and they had this like, wild long thing, and then they wake up and they're sad because it was just a dream. So people have really positive experience, they wake up thinking. So there is that misalignment, I think, a lot, where because maybe of the intense, maybe that would be bad, right? If we said, oh, you can make your dreams great, and then all of a sudden you highlight how boring your waking life is. So we wouldn't want to go that far, right? But so I think that those are in there, but I think that those get weeded out in terms of noise. I think that they're just to lower the case. So I think those are in our data set too, but they're just disproportionate to the amount of times that there is a much more subtle issue. That actually might be the case though, that maybe it's the extreme cases. Maybe I haven't looked at that. Like maybe if there's a little bit of positive emotion in your dream, it carries over, but maybe if it's a lot, it kind of, that's not as good.
Yeah, mostly because I was asking that I may have these sort of experiences quite a lot, or like even like then when you're reporting the dream to someone, it's like, well, actually the dream wasn't that bad, but I really feel very bad. So I'm more curious in terms of like your data set and maybe looking to the ones that are kind of like were attributed as negative mood, then maybe to explore this a bit more and to see, well, was actually because the mood was negative during the dream, or was because the content itself that then it's attributed afterwards, not during the dream experience.
I see. I see. So we could add a question that says like, how did you think? Was that a positive experience for you?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I'll just butt in with a quick question from the chat because this is a quick one. Yes. Could your result be biased by the trait being fond of lucid dreaming?
Yeah, I think so. The induction studies, I think, are useful to get around that because we're inducing lucid dreams a lot in people that are don't have prior experience with lucid dreaming. There is in most cases a potential selection bias where the people that are signing up for our studies are people that are interested in lucid dreams and interested in having them. So I think that there's probably a small effect in there of that with people that these are particularly people that are searching for lucid dreams, but not always. Maybe we could add a question like that about people's motivations to lucid dream to account for that. That's a good idea in the future. That's kind of like the success criticism of people just kind of having a sense of achievement afterwards. That's a good question. Thanks, Karim.
Marina.
Yes, I have 3 questions. 2 are related to the first part of your talk. So I was wondering if it makes any sense to try to compare the dream reports, the evaluations that are in the dream reports when you use the dictionary-based approach to text analysis with the kind of narrative style that people have in general to remember things in everyday life, because sometimes people may be more descriptive than evaluative. And other times people maybe they are more evaluative and they use more emotional words. So maybe doing a comparison, it will also help to see, I don't know if it's helpful. So well, that was the first question. The second question is if you have any hypotheses about why certain emotions like anxiety and positive emotions, they have a strong relation with the mood during awake experience, and no anger or, for example, and sadness, as you found in your study, if there is any hypothesis on why some emotions are related and other ones are not. And the third question is just if there is some studies or comparison, or you have in mind to compare, for example, the cases of lucid nightmares with non-lucid nightmares, and what would be the differences or the consequences, because it seems that in certain cases it's not only lucidity but also the control that we have during the dream. So
sorry, I missed the first part of the last question. Can you say that one again?
Yes, it's more just to try to, if you have some idea or about comparing lucid nightmares or lucid bad experience, bad dreaming with the non-lucid one. Just similar, or there are differences. So there were my 3 questions. Thank you, Remington.
Yes, so the writing style, number one, definitely has something to do. I mean, that's kind of what Luke is based off of, is writing style impact. But most of the writing style technique findings are related to kind of like article usage and pronoun usage and things like that, like kind of the function words. And so these more content-based things like the death and leisure categories that I presented on, and those are going to be less influenced by writing style and emotion stuff. There's definitely some influence of people that choose to use more anxious words and so forth are going to be influenced by that. But notably, our analyses in that data set are have within subjects components to them. So we have multiple data points for each subject, and so those models there is some effect after controlling for sort of writing style for each person. The anger and sadness, why did that not come out? I imagine that anxiety is just, I should look at this. This is what I was writing down, like they're just base rates in the dream. So imagine that anger and sadness just there wasn't enough anger and sadness content in the dreams to find any relationship. It could be that it's there, it's just really small. The anxiety words are just way more prevalent in these documents. So you have much more likely, there's a wider distribution of those. So there's much more likely to find some effect. So I don't think it's anything inherent about the emotions themselves, like anxiety and sadness. The nightmare thing I think is so interesting, lucid versus non-lucid nightmares. I haven't done that analysis. I would like to. I don't know that I have enough lucid nightmares to do the analysis, but my intuition is that from reading them is that lucid nightmares are worse because it's a much more vivid experience it's for the same reason that lucid dreams are often better that people like them, because they're so vivid and it feels so real, and people describe these in such detail. For that same reason, having a bad experience while lucid sucks. So I agree. I agree that with the view that those are very infrequent, but sometimes they're harrowing enough to where I'm still like, I really want to be careful to make sure that those aren't happening, because they are really negative experiences for people. And just the same way I think lucid dreams have a particular way of carrying over into waking, I imagine the same is true for lucid nightmares. So yeah, it's an important thing. They always come down to control is what they come down to, though, relative to the lucid non-nightmares. So you really you need to have control. It's when people try to do something and it goes already that it's so bad.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
So Roru has put her hand down, so I'm not sure if that's oh, do you want us to ask your question?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of questions about lucid dreams and dreams in general, but if there's a possibility of having this feeling of deja vus in dreams, and if we have certain fixed scenarios in dreams that help us recognize them and furthermore have lucid dreams on account of that.
Like, so what is initiating like maybe some deja vu feeling makes people become lucid potentially?
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah.
If there exists that feeling of deja vu there in dreams, and that help us to have lucid dreams.
Yeah, probably. I'm not. I think the jury's out on what exactly initiates lucidity, whether it's kind of dream bizarreness and it makes it happen, or something else entirely. Maybe like some feeling of deja vu while dreaming. Maybe it's kind of like that. It's just so hard to tell what comes first, because often these things are described as happening kind of simultaneously. I think that. Sorry. Yeah. I think that those analyses that get at the temporal progression of events, maybe I've been thinking about this a lot, about some measure of dream bizarreness with this text, and I have like 3 or 4 different ideas, but they're all somewhat dissatisfying in different ways, and I'm looking forward to Manu's talk about dream bizarreness to maybe give me some insight into maybe which one is better. But it would be nice to have a dream bizarreness measure. We can see if that peaks prior to the moment of lucidity, or whether that is after. Another aspect of this analysis that we're doing is coding a subset for the precise moment of lucidity. And so we have manual people going in, and then we're going to look at before lucidity and after. And so that maybe is what you're talking. We could look at the features, the cognitive features of the lucid dream right before they get lucid, and then maybe the bizarreness, or there's something of deja vu.
Is there any possibility that we can create, or I don't know, our brain can create new memory traces on account of dreams? It's like having the memories just from dreams. Like you remember an old dream you had in the dream and you recognize it. It's an old dream. and it may have a variation.
Yeah,
but
this is
not related to your real life. It's just about your dream. You are there and you recognize your dream.
Yeah, this is kind of tripping me out because I had this conversation yesterday with a bunch of people about this. Like, maybe I'm just thinking of it because of that, and maybe this isn't what you're asking. But we were talking about the issue of dream recall, and so is it kind of a state-dependent thing? Is it that you're not recalling these dreams because you're in a different state entirely, or is it the transition from sleep to wake that knocks out any of that? And so we were talking about, if it is about the state change, then it should be that when you have dreams, you would recall you would have kind of dream specific memories, if it was that, right? If your memories were kind of, you would have some memories that were kind of isolated to the dream state, where you could be in a dream and you could recall previous dreams that you had while you're dreaming.
Yeah, it's like having a parallel life.
Yeah, it would be like a separate thing. So I'm taking no stance on whether that's true or not or anything. Yeah. It's just like it was a fun conversation we were having. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about my own experience because it's the only experience I had. But
yeah, when it came up, and I'll say that there was, a group of us, and like half of the people, maybe like 4 or 5 people, were all kind of nodding. I haven't had that, so I didn't really get it. But there was 4 or 5 people that were nodding along and saying that, yeah, that totally jives with their experiences and stuff like that. So I think it's interesting. The issue of dream recall is I think an interesting one to learn more about too. So it has to do with that.
Yeah, and well, the last one that is related is that if we have levels of lucidity, I don't know how to say, in our dreams. I mean, related to lucid dreams, because maybe you are completely lucid that in your dream and you recognize it's a dream and you act consequently, but maybe you can change stuff, but you're not completely lucid.
Yeah, this for sure. This is kind of the reason that I went down the whole garden path of the second half of the projects I presented in the second half, because it is a little bit frustrating when people talk about lucid dreaming as this definitively control all, like the recreational, do whatever you want whenever you want thing, and that's rarely people's precise experiences, at least for inexperienced lucid dreamers. And so it's much more often that you like try to do something and it doesn't really work, or maybe you have control but you don't totally know that you aren't fully aware that you're dreaming. Maybe this is cheesy, but I'll say that like we did try to really dive into this topic specifically in the philosophy and mind sciences paper. It's specifically about exploring the different levels of control in a lucid dream. And so I'll say that is maybe a place I could direct you as a place where we go into discussion about it. But yeah, that's what's leading to lucid nightmares in some cases too, where people aren't completely in control of the situation. And sometimes people think they're in control and then they try and it fails. It's a really weird, like, we're now interested, because of those results we're finding, we're interested in figuring out how to increase dream control, not just lucidity, because that's an important thing. And I think that Tata Stumbras had some really cool ideas about mindfulness relating to dream control, and we're trying to follow up on some of that now. Because you have to kind of like really believe that you're in control of your dream. It's kind of a weird situation where people think they're in control, and then maybe through some kind of deep belief that they can't control it or something, that doesn't happen. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Yes.
So we have come to the up to the end of the time. There was another question about whether you studied antidepressants.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay, but perhaps Michaela could ask, the group, if anyone has studied it, just to find out about it in the Gather Town, if that you want to bring that up and go to the Gather Town. So I'd like everyone to thank Remy for his talk and answering all the questions, and then we will have once again a small break and move on to the next talk.
Thanks, Melanie.
Thank you. And maybe only 3 minutes break because we are a little late. So until 25, if it is okay with you. And then Matthew Newsom is going to present. So see ya. Hi, Matthew.
Hey, how are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes. I will make you co-host because I think if not, you cannot share your screen. So I have made you co-host. Here we go. I will present you, but people are still, I think, in the break, during the break.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time here. Are you telling me to share my screen? I just did.
Yes, yes, yes.
Perfect. And so hopefully, can you see all that okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, great.
So we just wait 1 minute.
Yeah, no problem.
So Melanie's back, maybe we should start, right? I hope the other people is there behind the screen. So, well, the next speaker and the last speaker of today is Matthew Newsom, who is visiting assistant professor of anthropology at the Southern Utah University. So Matthew, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks, Marina and Melanie and Francisco for organizing. This is really great. It's very interesting, and I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing because I know you're all smart people, so I'm guessing you organize this the order of speakers intentionally, and I think it's great because we are kind of slowly transitioning from very, very quantitative data to what for me will be very, very qualitative data. And I think it kind of opens up this very broad perspective on how memory and dreaming and emotion, the variability that exists within these three topics. So I'm going to do my best because I of course, being in Utah, I woke up very, very early. And so I have limited sleep. And of course, the way to deal with that is to drink lots and lots of coffee. So then you're trying to balance, you know, the jitters from the coffee and the like tiredness and sluggishness from being very sleepy. So I'll do my best to kind of balance between that. But the talk I have is titled Dreaming in Berlin, Collective Memory, Emotion, and Selfhood. And I'm hoping that this like very basic and broad title will be brought out and allow everybody to kind of generate some conclusions about this like very broad topic by looking at what will eventually be something very, very specific, because I'm only going to talk about a single dream here. So just to give everybody an idea about where I'm going with this presentation, I'll basically give an overview because I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the discipline of anthropology or how ethnographic research maybe works. So I'll give a slight overview on how anthropologists work or how I gathered my own data, what I'm working with in terms of a data set, and then briefly review the anthropological approach to dreaming, at least the kind of like the little tribe within anthropology that studies dreaming. It's very small. And there are just a few ways that anthropologists do look at dreams. And so I'll give an overview of that one way, in that one small way in this one smaller tribe of anthropologists, just so that people have an understanding about how we approach these things, and then what we can do when we take a qualitative analysis of dreaming. And then I'll give a little bit of a background on my own research, what I'm most interested in, and then that way folks will have a better understanding about why I'm approaching dreaming in the way that I do, with a couple of key terms and concepts so that everybody can kind of wrap their minds around things. Because when you're talking cross disciplines, I think very often, as we all know, right, there's a tendency to have term confusion, and so I'll try to be as clear as I can about those those concepts that I'm introducing. And then I'm going to make an argument about what I see as the relevance of collective memories for dreaming through a single dream, as I said, from a woman I call Heidi, and I title her dream Disconnected. And so we'll explore that dream specifically, doing a kind of a qualitative analysis based on the dream content, the dream report, and then I'll come back and offer a few concluding thoughts and go from there. So, at some background to my own personal research, I did research in ethnographic research in Berlin over the course of 4.5 or 5-ish years, and I went to Berlin to study how different subcultural groups maybe study dreaming. And I'm specifically interested in musical subcultures. I grew up in musical subcultures, and you'll see me in this background here looking very happy about doing my field work, which was actually quite fun, contrary to maybe that face. I was trying to gather dream reports from people who, I think the delicate way to put it is they enjoy partying. To be quite honest, and I found that this was a very difficult group to gather like a wide body of data from, so at least in terms of dreaming. So I switched while I was in Berlin to doing what many other scholars who study dreams comprehensively. I was teaching a course at a university in Berlin, and I found you can gather a lot of dreams if you force your students to write them down and submit them as an assignment. So out of 33 different students who are at a kind of a prominent left-wing university, I taught an anthropology seminar, and these are young adults, early 20s. Majority of them are women or identify as women. And from them, I gathered about just over 500 dreams. And so I got my wide body of data, which would allow these kind of like comparative exercises that I was interested in doing. Specifically, I wanted to see how we could explore dream content and what these things, what different dream reports might tell us. And so I conducted either collaborative dream analyses with individuals, or I had them conduct their own dream analyses and then come to me with them, and then we would discuss them. So the way that kind of pushed me into my approach to dreaming is to wonder how dreams, I'm interested if Remington brought up this cat idea, and so I'm interested in why do people dream about cats on this night versus that night versus any other night. And I'm situating my research within this broader perspective on dreaming, where we understand based on either psychoanalytic research or psychological research or anthropological research, we understand dreams as this place where people take the moments of their daily lives that they find problematic or that don't fit somehow, and they work on whatever those problems are in their nighttime experiences, in their oniric lives. So for some people, these might be individual personal problems, but from the anthropological perspective, we're really interested in how those personal problems are not merely personal, although they certainly are personal. We're also interested in how those problems are also very, very cultural. So how people might, if we can say, take 33 German university students and ask them about the problems that they confront in their dreams, if they're all dreaming about similar issues, then we can make some theory about how to understand that dream content and explain specifically why an individual might have a particular dream with particular content or particular imagery, and why at that point in their lives, what is going on in their lives at that specific time that might prompt those particular dreams. And so again, if we're talking about a cat here, why would a cat show up in the dream as opposed to any other component of that person's daily life, right? So if the continuity hypothesis tells us that people dream about their daily lives from an anthropological perspective, we're definitely interested in like why those specific moments of the light of anybody's individual experience might show up in any particular dream. And the way we would get at this, drawing on especially psychoanalysis, but also kind of cultural theory, is to collaborate with our research participants in ways that we can both act as simultaneous experts and approach a dream narrative from kind of two different perspectives, and then develop a collaborative understanding about specific dream imagery. So the individual dreamer is going to be the expert on their life, and they will be able to relate. Well, okay, so here's the thing about my cat. The cat always, pisses me off and makes me mad because I don't know, the cat does this thing during the day and knocks something off of the counter, and I get mad or I get nervous about my cat's health, or I have to spend lots of money to pay for my cat's medications or something like this, or my landlord might throw me out of my house because my cat is destroying the room or something like this. Maybe that's why this person is dreaming about the cat. And as a trained ethnographer, the anthropologist who collaborates with this in this analysis, we are asking, or we're able to bring to the table an understanding of how that particular experience with cat problems might actually be a cultural issue. Maybe if we're talking about say specifically medication with a cat, I don't know I really don't know how other maybe more socialized medicine systems deal with veterinary care, but I definitely know that in the USA these are very prominent problems. I have actually no kid and a close friend of mine right now who has a GoFundMe page right now because one of her cats was just diagnosed with stomach cancer, and so she's trying to pay for this operation, which is an unfortunate reality that lots of people in the United States, of course, are living with and dealing with. How do we pay for our healthcare? From my own personal experience, I can also say this is a crappy position to be in, wanting how to pay for that. So the anthropologist then would take these personal problems and expand them to a more a broader cultural level. And the important thing to recognize is that while we might draw some techniques, some analytical techniques or theoretical ideas from psychoanalysis, we are not trying to say that we can analyze a specific dream narrative and say like, oh, well, if somebody dreams about the cat, then it must mean that they're dealing with problems, say, related to how to finance healthcare or something like this. There's not some automatic association. There is no, from the anthropological perspective, and definitely as I view the value of dreams for anthropological research, there's no correct meaning. There's no, there is no, it's a futile effort to try and come up with some definitive answer about what a dream means. Rather, we can use that dream narrative as an opportunity to develop some personal and cultural insight about the people we're trying to study, which is, of course, the most important exercise for ethnographic research. How do we understand humans and their daily lives? What sense can we make of people's experience? And so if we accept that, right, at the very worst, we're learning about people, right, which is our goal. And at the very best, we actually come up with some meaningful explanations for why somebody might dream about that cat. And in order to kind of fill in the gaps between that very, very least and very best, I think it's important that we take seriously the politics of dreaming. So if we're interested in the things that rack people's daily lives, the issues that they're confronting in their daily lives, those daily lives are political. And so contrary to studies or claims, especially made by Domhoff, the anthropological perspective on dreaming is that it is in fact very, very political. It is a political exercise, and that can be both in the literal sense, where somebody might dream, in the case of Germany, and in the case of my research, people will dream of specific political parties, or their attendance at political rallies, or their involvement in political activism or political figures might arise in their dreams. But it can also be politics in the socio-political sense, where people are dreaming about refugees and how to incorporate them into German society, or dreaming about forms of discrimination, colonialism, which will come up in the dream that I'm going to highlight in just a minute. Other forms of right-wing violence that are taking place and on the rise in German society, maybe religious or national identities and the issues associated with that. All of these components that, as a trained anthropologist or expert in this particular cultural context, we can see how dreams are filled, they're chock full of political content. So if you, in my work, if you control for dream size, say doing a content analysis where you're using somewhere between 50 and 300 words in a dream report, you get about 23%. So almost every fourth dream that an individual has some political content. Or if you don't control for dream size and you just let people write out large, big dreams, as Remington described, you come up with an even higher number, right? Of which makes intuitive sense. If you have more words in your dream report, there's a greater likelihood of encountering any type of content, political or otherwise. So this is the general approach that we take in anthropology, or definitely that I subscribe to. In my work, I'm personally interested in collective memories and how conversation about the past might shape personal identity. And in Germany, these collective memories undoubtedly are coming back to questions about World War II, what took place, why it took place, what people are supposed to do about that history. It's problematic. Nobody who I ever spoke to argued that say World War II or the Nazi era was a great time. Obviously, they in a decidedly left-wing political context, left-wing university students who are taking an anthropology seminar, right, contextualizing the people who I'm talking with, they are deeply troubled by their own history and their own personal connections with history, and so they engage in conversations about this photo here comes from a World Cup celebration in 2014, after Germany won the World Cup final, and people are waving the German flag. And then the next week, I'm sitting in a barber shop getting my hair cut, and the barbers are complaining about how awful they find it that people would even dare show their patriotism by waving German flags. So these conversations about why it's appropriate to wave a flag or why it's not, always rupture into people's daily lives. And they're related to these concerns that people have about the past. Hey, patriotism is what led us to the Nazi era and the horrible things that took place during that time period. And so we want to move away from that. And these these things shape then people's identities about what it means to be, say, a single individual and a nationalized individual as a either German or a non-German, as lots of people maybe would try to describe themselves. And so I'm interested then in that connection between these collective memories, this plural conversation about the past, plural because people are have competing ideas, of course, about what the past is or what it means for contemporary lives. And I'm especially interested in how then that we can learn about that relationship between collective memories and identity or selfhood by studying dream content. What if dreams are a space where people work on personal and cultural problems? What are the personal and cultural problems related to Germany's problematic history that show up in a dream of any individual living there? So this is my specific research interest, and what I'm going to argue is that dreams themselves are a great place to look at the affective dimensions of collective memories. So why somebody would be interested in collective memories, or they would be interested in their past, I don't think is a neutral topic. I don't think it's something that people approach just as, oh, I'm learning history or I'm talking about a historical topic. Rather, they have opinions about that history. That history maybe moves them to act in certain ways, especially if they're going to take part in left-wing political activism, as is the case for many of my research participants. So I'm arguing dreams then illuminate these affective dimensions, and I'm particularly interested in how historical violence shows up in people's dreams. And so the dream that I'm going to take from Heidi is part of this larger component of my research, which is under review right now, where I'm interested in images of death, and death, a prominent feature of historical violence, of course, and collective memories about that violence. So I'm looking at dreams that contain images of death and looking for relationships between these images and collective memories, and then asking what are the emotional or the affective dimensions of those dreams. And what I find is that very often the emotional dimensions or the affective dimensions are related to what we call cultural anxieties, these affective states that are historically produced and socially experienced. So again, if we take 33 research participants and we analyze their dreams and the content of their dreams, we can look for these shared emotional states or shared problems that these people might have with their dreams. So I'm going to click on the next slide, and I don't want everybody to freak out. It's going to be a bunch of text. It's going to be the dream narrative for Heidi's dream, and we're going to read it. And I think it's important to present the whole narrative, even though it's a bit of a faux pas, right, to have a slide on the PowerPoint with a bunch of text. But I think it's a good exercise. So let me actually move the what do you call these, the video bits, so I can see what I'm there we go, so I can see what the text is on the slide here. So Heidi says, I dreamt I was in Berlin during the Second World War. And I'm sorry, I should say that the sections here that are highlighted are sections that I'm looking at as key, or that Heidi looks at as key to our understanding, our analysis of the dream. So I was in Berlin during the Second World War. The buildings and the people were like the present, but the time was in the past. Before the war broke out, I was talking with my mother and we were having problems with our phones. While saying goodbye, we already knew we would not see each other again, which made me feel quite uncomfortable. I was out with my friend Amanda, and suddenly I knew that war would break out. I was the only one who knew. I thought hard and tried to remember which buildings were not destroyed at that time so that we could hide there, but I simply could not remember. So I became exasperated with myself and my bad historical knowledge. I briefly thought of the Reichstag government building, but then I noticed it was destroyed. Next, I thought of all the old residential buildings in the Wedding district of Berlin where I used to live, which mostly survived the war. Just as we fled into one of those old buildings, we heard a loud bomb exploding underground beneath us. We ran as fast as we could. People in cars and on bicycles didn't notice anything and behaved as usual. While running hand in hand, we looked back at the house and saw it collapsing. I remember the horrible thought and the worst feeling that I would be unable to reach my mother before I would die. I don't remember how the dream ended. And you'll notice several ellipses there where I'm, for the sake of brevity, I'm cutting out sections of the dream here. So a little bit of background in terms of Heidi's life and the days leading up to this dream. In these, maybe the couple of weeks before the dream, Heidi is having these problems with her mother where her mother's reaching out, trying to contact her and saying, hey, I love you, I just want to let you know. And Heidi is either too busy or just does not take the time to get back in touch with her mom. And so if we accept that, we can say, oh, okay, this dream then is just about this person's relationship with their mother. This dream is just about personal concerns, which certainly lots of content analysts specifically would say, like, okay, yeah, this is just a dream about personal concerns. However, when you talk to Heidi, she says, yeah, it's about this relationship with my mom, and I have this like anxiety over my mom's death, which I've kind of always had, and even Piaget says, oh yeah, these are things, you know, right? Like 100 years ago, Piaget says that this is a common personal anxiety, but Heidi says, no, it's about that, but it's about so much more, because this is really related to all this history that I've been learning recently also that relates to what she calls her family's destiny. And so she's saying, hey, I've been, trying to do personal research to see where I come from and understand how my great-grandparents were involved in, say, Nazi era, either genocide or the resistance. She has a great-grandfather who was imprisoned for Nazi war crimes. She has a great-grandfather who was part of the resistance, and she's trying to figure out, what does that mean for me? Who am I? She's also trying to confront Cold War era violence narratives where she says, yeah, my family is we had people on both sides of the wall during national division, and I had people who tried to escape or tried to cross the border, and they were one family member was killed, other family members were imprisoned, and so she's reckoning with this personal family history, which of course is a cultural issue. She's not the only ethnic German in German society who's dealing with these issues. So I'm saying, okay, look, these are cultural issues, and when we engage in further conversation about this dream, we come to recognize three different cultural anxieties surrounding specifically historical guilt. And so I'm going to explore each one of these three and say that these three components here, these three cultural anxieties, are really part of Heidi's recognition or coming to terms with the fact that Germany's history of death, all of these collective memories of historical violence, are really actually her coming to terms with the fact that history is her history, right? This history is a personal history. So it's kind of her effort at taking ownership over collective violence. So the first cultural anxiety relates to what Germans, and I leave out the vowel here in the word no or new, because lots of Germans ever since the end of the war, we're asking, okay, well, wait, what were people really aware of? Did people know what was happening to their neighbors, their friends, or relatives who were being taken away in either trucks or on trains? Did they really know that people were being murdered en masse? Do they really know, what fate awaited all of the people who were taken away? And so Heidi's asking her own self, like, okay, what did people know back then? But really, for her, this is an exercise about what she knows now, right? As in the dream, she's saying she has this bad historical knowledge, and she's trying to remember which of the buildings might be destroyed. And for her, this raises this personal experience where she grew up in the Wedding district, specifically in a section of the Wedding district known as the African Quarter, or the Afrikanisches Viertel. little. So, she's running in the dream through this vetting district, and she's trying to make sense of this. So she says, in school, we were not taught about the origins of the names on the streets, on which we were educated. Oh, what a shame. My lack of knowledge about Africa and the African quarter is due to a colonial dominated education, right? Sounding very left-leaning, right? As she's learning about colonialism in school and post-colonialism through her college education, she's coming to recognize, right, how her upbringing is a cultural experience and the problems that she identifies with it. So she says, yeah, this colonial dominated education it continues to be taught. It's not an individual problem, it's a country-based and a cultural problem. In my dream, I'm mad at myself for my bad historical knowledge about the Second World War, which was based on genocide, just like the naming of the district in which I used to live. So for her, right, she's again coming to terms with this sense that, hey, her personal history is this broader German history, or right, the flip side of that this history of historical violence is her personal history, and that then says, okay, these are not these collective memories about that history are not just, say, something benign or something neutral, but rather they become an emotionally present concern. And whether that's prompted by the millions of monuments that one might encounter in Berlin or Germany or broader Europe, dedicated to World War II or the Holocaust or the victims of the Holocaust specifically, whether that's going to a tourist shop and finding sections of those, these are little models that you can buy at a tourist shop that are part of the German memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe. And it's a bit interesting how these things become things that you can buy. You can purchase these. You'll see a little section of the Berlin Wall too, right? People encounter these in their daily lives, and they prompt, I argue, daily waking considerations about what these memories are and what they mean for the individual dreamer, right? This is how they become an emotionally present concern. And for somebody who's at this university and learning about these issues in school, or at least broader theoretical concepts like post-colonial theory and whatnot, this past becomes an emotionally present concern, and then that prompts a dream like this. So why this dream and why now? Well, that's one way we can look at that. The second anxiety provoked here is relative to the Holocaust as something that maybe could have been prevented or maybe not. Could somebody have intervened? Could somebody have stopped what was going on? And did people intervene? And people, or ethnic Germans, very often, as a wealth of, again, psychoanalytic or anthropological or sociological research has shown, lots of Germans are writing memoirs confronting, what responsibility looks like for people at during the Nazi era, and whether or not people could have intervened, because that, hey, if you could not have done anything, then maybe you don't really have the guilt, or if you could have intervened, then you definitely own or possess a lot more guilt than you otherwise would. And so for Heidi, as we talk about this particular concept, she says, this dream is really, it really reminds me of all these notions about privilege. And of course, at the time, 2014 to 2019, just as today, concepts like white privilege or gender privilege, right? These are common concepts that left-wing political students are likely to discuss or to think about. And for Heidi, this is a problem because she sees herself as failing to speak up and deal with her privilege, or to own her privilege and recognize the benefits that she receives as a white woman who otherwise would not have been, say, a victim of the Holocaust. And so she's as we talk about what's going on in the dream and specific dream imagery, for her, she's bringing up her own memories about moments where she's failed other people who she should have spoken up to defend. And she's part of this kind of larger question this cultural conversation about prioritizing one's own personal interests. Hey, I don't want to intervene or potentially intervene and say try to stop the Gestapo from taking people away, because if I do, then maybe I would get I would also be become a victim of the Holocaust. So she says another slide with a lot of text. My family was not racialized during the Second World War because we were not Jewish. In Germany today, there are rumors among my generation that during the war, German witnesses did not notice the atrocities against the Jewish people. This is a big lie, and it hurts so much to hear people say that. Some people even claim that there were no gas chambers and argue that it was physically impossible to kill people that way. I asked my grandfather, who was a boy during the war, whether he saw Jews being deported. He said yes. He often saw vehicles in the middle of the street collecting Jews. It was no secret. And he told me that non-Jewish people could not do anything because, for example, if his mother, a mother of four, had said something against it, she would have risked her life and the lives of her children. I think that all this knowledge and my family's history explain my behavior in the dream. During World War II, you needed to act secretly, and you couldn't raise your voice publicly to act against the Nazi regime. Maybe that's why I stayed silent in her dream. And by that, she's referencing her inability to, or her lack of informing other people who are unaware that the war is about to break out. She doesn't tell them, right? The people riding the bicycles, the people driving cars are going on business as usual. It's just another day for them, and she finds that concerning. And her friend Amanda, who she's trying to help, she says she fails in the dream to find an adequate hiding space for Amanda. And then when you ask, well, who is Amanda, this person who shows up in your dream? She says, oh, well, Amanda herself she's a foreigner. She doesn't really fit in. She doesn't speak German. And so then when we kind of consider this as maybe a representation of otherness more broadly, then we can see how that guilt over self-prioritization, that failure is really a means of repeating this silence of the past. So silence either in the sense that people do not speak out when they see Jews being deported, right? Maybe because they couldn't, maybe because they could, I don't know. That's how to, it could have been either one of these, right? This is the question that people like Heidi are trying to deal with. And then maybe it's also silence in the sense of, hey, lots of people were committed lots of awful, atrocious things during the Holocaust. And then afterwards, they didn't tell anybody about it. They tried to sweep those memories under the rug. They did not tell their children about what they did. They did not tell their grandchildren about what they did. And by doing so, right, all of the emotional problems contained in these memories just get passed on intergenerationally. So this trauma is transmitted intergenerationally, and the emotional components of those memories along with it. Finally, what I think all of this comes down to is this third anxiety relative to collective guilt. And so for context, this photo right here is, I think, a good demonstration about how this conversation, right, the collective memories as a collective conversation about the past. You can see there's graffiti in this bathroom wall that says Hitler was right. Somebody comes along and writes wrong underneath it. Another person comes and writes Dynamuda, so your mother was right. This type of graffiti, forms this collective conversation that people are going to encounter in their daily lives. And for people like Heidi, they raise this concept of collective guilt, which we can think of as the degree to which different people possess guilt or feel a sense of guilt for sins committed by their personal ancestors, their cultural ancestors. And so in this dream, Heidi's wondering, okay, she's wrestling with the question of whether or not Germans today are guilty of the crimes of the past. And this is relative to a number of political discourses that can say, okay, what do we do? Should we admit refugees right now because we need to atone for the sins of our past? And by maybe admitting those refugees, maybe we're making up for the awful crimes that we committed in the past. And these questions then are evoked in these conversations that I have with Heidi, and she says, yeah, I have this guilt because, as she said in the quote in the last slide, that she's her family was not Jewish, and she recognizes, hey, I'm in the dream, I'm not running from the Gestapo. I'm not Jewish. This is not the problem that I have. I'm running from Allied bombing raids. That's what I'm running from. Well, which speaks again, she says, to this sense of privilege that she has. And so she recognizes this sense of privilege, and then asking about responsibility, asking, well, what does that responsibility entail? Does it entail that sense of guilt and the need to do something about it? And by kind of bringing up these personal memories and these personal understandings about this dream imagery, she starts talking about her own experience as a school student in elementary school, middle school, and high school, saying, we had all these experiences where every year we learn about the Second World War. Every year we learn about the Holocaust, and teachers tell us, you're a German, you are guilty. And I never really understood that, she says. She says, people would ask questions, well, why are we guilty? We weren't there. I didn't take part. I wasn't a part of the Holocaust. Why do I have this sense of guilt? So on the one hand, you have this cultural discourse that says, hey, collective guilt is a concept. German society has a collective guilt that they need to deal with, and whatever that means, right? This is where the plurality of collective memories come into play. And she's saying, I don't know what that really means. And when I asked my teachers as a student, well, what does that mean, I have collective guilt, and why do I have that collective guilt? She never got a clear answer. And so for her, this dream, is an opportunity to kind of explore that. Or for her, this dream is a moment where she's trying to figure out, what does collective guilt really mean? And then what does it mean for her? So again, why that dream and why now, right? As she confronts these issues, maybe when she goes into a bathroom and she sees that graffiti, maybe when she learns about the Holocaust day in and day out, maybe when she encounters different memorials, she's asking, okay, so what does this mean for me personally? So bringing this back, I would reiterate that I see this particular dream, right, and its content as part of this ongoing personal effort that Heidi has of dealing with whatever the past means for her. But of course, she's not the only one who's dealing with this. And in fact, it's a common theme that came up in my research, where people are trying to recognize what the past means for them, and trying to deal with or grapple with whatever sense of guilt they might personally have, or how they might relate to the past, and say genealogically, if my grandparents or great grandparents were involved in Nazi violence, what does that mean for me? Am I guilty? Or maybe they weren't. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they were part of the resistance, or maybe they were Jewish, or maybe they were my great grandmother was homosexual, and so maybe I'm not guilty, right? So this broader cultural effort of reckoning with the past is represented in this dream. And of course, it makes sense that somebody who's in college and really trying to address these existential questions about, where for Heidi, where do I stand in relation to these moral and political ontologies that I encounter as I read about history, or I learn about history, as I come across these issues in my waking life. And so my understanding of this then is that, hey, people encounter collective memories in their waking lives. Those memories they have affective dimensions. They elicit specific anxieties or specific emotional responses. And then people need to deal with that in dreams as a place where they might work on it, right? Where they might have some type of transformative mood, as Remington said. What does this mean? How can I reckon with that, or how can I deal with that? And then maybe in the next day, the person either contemplates those thoughts, or maybe they feel better about those issues. Those go in different directions for people. So I'm saying, people address these collective memories, and they tinker with the emotions. They scaffold their emotional response, or their emotional understandings or conceptualization of the past through their dreams. And that's how I view these dreams. That's how I explain why Heidi had this particular dream at this particular moment of her life. And I'll stop there and ask for questions. I hope we're not too late on time. I know things have been kind of moving a little bit behind, so 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 I thank you everybody for your attention, and to the organizers for inviting me. I'm having a hard time hearing. Marina, it looks like you're speaking, but maybe unmute.
Sorry, I didn't unmute myself, sorry. So sorry about that. So I was saying that we have 20 minutes for questions, more or less, because then we have to leave the room because there is another meeting. So, but that's okay, 20 minutes, I think. So there is a long comment. It's not a question, it's more a comment about someone who did a kind of similar research. I don't know if you see Matthew, it's Perrine Ruby, I think she left. Thank you very much for this very interesting perspective on the political and historical relevance of dreaming. I collected dreams during the first lockdown in 2020 in France, recently published in a book, Rêver pendant les confinements, that clearly highlighted the impact of the pandemic, but also the political decisions made to handle it on dream content. So it's just a comment, but maybe, I don't know, useful. Someone is asking you your mail. So Perrine Ruby is here and is asking you your mail to exchange. So maybe Matthew, write the mail, and then sure. We can. There are two hands, Remington and Melanie. So Remington, you can ask your question.
Yeah, that was really interesting. I had no idea you were going to run with the cat like that in school. Yeah, it definitely has me, thinking like, sometimes I think that the text analyses that I had presented on is kind of the solution. But then when you talk about all the different ways that the cat, the reasons that the cat could be incorporated and stuff, then I kind of think, well, like I'm missing all of the important subtleties entirely. So I don't know if there's a way to try to meet in the middle on them, where if I'm doing some kind of broad unsupervised analysis, but I'm targeting it more. So maybe something like a cat where everybody has different interpretations of it, that's kind of impossible for me to care about. But for something that I think everybody in the culture agrees on, like, does everybody view this one thing one way? Then I can make some predictions about maybe how to incorporate it. I think that's why people like the COVID stuff. People don't like the COVID stuff, but that's why people like looking at dreams and COVID, because it's like we all feel the same way about this, and how is it getting into our dreams? So I don't know. I am just wondering your thoughts on whether there is kind of a middle ground of using those analyses, but not being super ignorant about the different ways that these things are being incorporated and stuff.
Yeah. So it's hard. It's honestly, it's tough. A middle ground. I would love for there to be one. I think, if you try to say something like, okay, if you dream this, then maybe it means that, and you say people don't love the COVID stuff, but I think we would agree that everybody doesn't love the COVID stuff. I mean, I personally love COVID. It's my favorite time of my life. This is a joke for those who don't know my sense of humor. Maybe I should say that. People disagree with what COVID means and whether COVID is really something we should even be afraid of. And so while we can say like, okay, it's this broad cultural anxiety, we would recognize, but it's this like plural conversation about what's going on, right? Is it a political exercise? Is the vaccine, I don't know, going to become magnetic or do we need masks? Or no, we need 800 masks, right? People can fall on this kind of broad spectrum. So, bringing in that like cultural awareness, I think is helpful. So even if you can't say do in-depth multiple interviews with a particular research participant who's like, able to give you this broader background and personal background relative to their own personal experience, or maybe their social relationships and these kind of things, at least taking, a more complex view of or a complex accounting for whatever cultural images you identify in those dream narratives. So, what do cats mean? You can raise ideas about, I don't know, like crazy cat ladies, right? This like cultural model, and then you can relate a dream image like that to gender, perhaps, or to ideas that we have about what cats mean and why there are memes, or why they're cute, or why all of these cultural discourses that take place. You as if you at least allow for that complexity, I think you can maybe establish some type of middle ground. The problem with ethnographic research, which is great if you do it because it's real fun, it takes lots and lots and lots and lots of time, and especially if you're working in a society where you're not from, so that means you have to learn potentially a second language and deal with those kind of other issues, and it's just it takes so much resources to do that I think a lot of people either lean into it and accept it as their reality the way anthropologists do, or they say I can't dedicate that much time and fall on the other side. And I think the important thing is if you accept the plausibility or the value rather of both of these perspectives, then maybe you can establish that type of theoretical middle ground, if not methodologically, at least theoretically.
Yeah, that makes sense to do it in theory and not in methods. Yeah, I guess that reveals kind of my lack of anthropological training, that I'm kind of saying, well, find a thing that everybody agrees on and look at that. And you're like, yeah, well, there isn't really that thing. There's always going to be different views on things, and there isn't a common view. Cool, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Melanie?
Hi, really interesting talk. I don't know very much about anthropology myself, so apologies if things I have to say are ignorant. I always apologize like that. So I was just curious about the specific, for your purposes of kind of self-analysis and learning more about how we engage with our own kind of, I guess, psychology and culture, whether you think that dreams have a specific value in comparison, or a different value in comparison with other kind of self-reflective processes, like if we were to meditate on an idea, or if we were to mind wander and then report on mind wandering and then do a reflective analysis, or just use metacognitive skills to think about our own thoughts, to do a similar kind of process, whether dreams have some kind of added value or equal value, or something different. Is there any difference between dreaming and those other kind of associated cognitive processes?
Yeah, so I'll speak specifically from the discipline of anthropology, which is probably your expectation for my answer anyways. But, we have a long history of studying what we might lump together as altered states of consciousness. And, for lack of a better all-inclusive umbrella term, we can include maybe dreams in this. I would say all of these are valuable for generating insight into, understanding the human condition. Me personally, because I work in a Western context, I'm going to kind of come across some self-validating, theoretical ideas that I will enter into my own research having. Whereas if I go cross-culturally and I'm working, say, somewhere in the middle of Papua New Guinea or something like this, working among an indigenous group there, I might come across a completely different perspective on, say, dreaming itself. So then what we define as the dream is really variable. What we define as the dream experience becomes variable. What we define as, even whether that's a first person personal experience, can vary based on who we're engaging with research wise. So, it gets difficult to kind of like make these broader theoretical arguments or to develop those. I don't think it's impossible, but my initial inclination is to just say, yeah, all of those things are great. All of those different perspectives, I mean, Remington shows us about lucid dreaming, and I think that's slightly different from what I'm showing in my own work, right? Even though they're both Western contexts and they're both, versions of dreaming, they're still very different versions of dreaming. And people who engage on that or engage in that concept on Reddit are doing it in a very different way than this like personal conversation that I'm having with somebody like Heidi about their dream, right? And we both come up with really interesting conclusions. So I think that would be, where I would try to direct our understanding about how to make these comparisons, is to say they all offer some sort of value. But I wouldn't say that like, well, if you take ayahuasca or something like this, and you have some self-induced psychotropic experience, that's worthless because it's relative, it's induced by drugs. I wouldn't say that that's worthless for learning about this human experience or this cultural or maybe religious phenomenon. Instead, I would say, no, there's something valuable there, and it might be similar to this context, and it might not be. But recognizing that all of these things do have value, I think, is a worthwhile exercise. And I think that's kind of a non-answer for your question, other than to say like, yes. And that's all I'm going to say. Those are great things. Yeah, I love them all. Next question. I don't mean to do that, but to say like it gets, I think, really complex. And when you change, not just say the experiential unit of analysis, you also change, in addition, right, say cultural context, then you're going to come up with radically different perspectives or radically different understandings about what these things mean or what we can learn from them, right?
So can I follow up on that? So even if they aren't, they can be different versions of the same thing or something. I guess I was interested also in, you kind of mentioned at the end that maybe the dreams are for thinking about them the next day. So I guess this is kind of related to that topic. So like, if I'm thinking that maybe the influence is to the dreams affect your mood or something like that, but and a lot of people are thinking that the dreams are an active processing of the thought in some way. I have a memory of the Holocaust, and the dream helps to reshape that memory of the Holocaust. But what you're thinking and what Melanie's asking about is more like, I'm dreaming about it so that I think about it while I'm awake. Is that right? Am I thinking about that right, or am I not thinking about that?
So I think it goes both directions, right? Your daily experience influences your dream. And then just as you very clearly show, right, that dream is going to influence your experience, say, the next day. And so I don't think that say, I have a problem with the Holocaust or my personal connection to it. I have a dream, all of a sudden I've solved that problem, right? It's rather this kind of ongoing dialogue that, say, the self is updating its own understanding of itself, right? The individual is trying to come to terms with this, and of course this doesn't happen overnight, right? This is something that takes place, over the course of months or years. And so, this kind of feedback loop that happens between daily experience and oniric experience, I think just kind of perpetually influences itself, so that, somebody is slowly coming to whatever their own understanding is of their past or their relationship with the Holocaust, or, how they feel about their cat, right? It's not just this individual, one night and now solved it. Which I know you're not trying to say that, but this is how I would look at that.
No, that's awesome. So that's really interesting, because I kind of laughed off the idea. I said I'm going to focus on mood, because if you dream about a cat, there's no reason to expect you're going to see a cat in waking. I was kind of laughing that off as like these precognitive dreams, but actually you're saying makes a little more sense, that there is some truth in that. When I dream about the cat, I might not, there's no way to predict whether I'm going to see a cat, but I might think about the cat more while I'm awake. So my mental contents of what I'm thinking about it's not just mood related, but like the content of what I think about while I'm sleeping is going to feed back into the stuff I think about while I'm waking, even if it's not predicting my physical interactions. It's really interesting, because the dream could be kind of kickstarting something that you should be thinking about more often. That's really cool.
Totally, and the comment about COVID, I think, is a really good example of this, where say lockdowns and masks and vaccinations and the disease pathogens, all of these things now are more more present in people's waking lives, and so then, as the study mentioned in the comment, and also there's a lot of really cool stuff happening. I know 3 colleagues who are working on I know 4 colleagues actually who are working on how COVID dreams work, and whether related to emotions or related to anxieties or related to understandings about national identity and race and racism, these kind of things. They're more present in people's daily lives, along with the cultural discourses about them. People knew about vaccines before COVID. People knew about diseases before COVID. But of course, now they're more present in people's dreams. And I suspect it's probably a missed opportunity. If somebody could have predicted the occurrence of COVID, it would have been nice to see some type of comparative data based on a content analysis, especially something like what you might be interested in doing, to see how those specific emotions relative to disease pathogens or relative to medical concepts more broadly, right, how those might shift in the post-COVID era. And then you can start to measure, right, how people are updating their relationships with, say, medical concepts, or how dreams are involved in that effort.
Yeah, and COVID is interesting because it highlights too, not how, I think the continuity stuff often talks about things you physically encounter. Like masks makes more sense. I see more masks in my dreams, but it's also internal content. You don't see COVID, but it's something that you dream about, because it's really not about what you come across physically. It's just about what's in your head, whether that's physical or something you just think about a lot.
Totally, and then for me, and especially in the context of this workshop, I would stress that those physical encounters, right, they become mental encounters, and they're not benign, right? Just like these collective memories, people aren't neutral about the Holocaust. They have very clear feelings and strong political feelings, especially with something like COVID, whether it's fear or it's anger or it's any other form of anxiety, right? I mean, those are totally attached to people's experiences when they see the mask, or when they think about their potential to become infected, or their anger perhaps at whatever political decisions are being made or aren't being made, right? We see that definitely in regular daily national media. So
we have a couple of minutes before leaving. I wanted to ask you a question. It's more related maybe with the methodology, right? Do you try to compare, for example, different populations? Because I imagine that maybe there are some young people who don't really care about historical issues. The group that you analyzed they were students in anthropology, and you said that they belong to the university that is left wing. So I was wondering if maybe to try to understand also better how all these personal own collective concerns may be together during the dream or not. It would be useful to try to compare with another group of population, and also maybe in Germany, and also maybe in other parts of the world, another group who had a similar kind of experience, and they may also feel guilt because of the past of something. So do you know something about that, or is the kind of method that can be used? Or
yeah, so my research is specifically with left-wing Berliners. Even the dreams that I have from subcultural members they still evoke left-wing political themes, although I wouldn't say that I have enough data to really make a definitive comparison between these two groups. However, Germany, like say in the United States and many other places, there is a prominent wave of populism taking place right now in German society. And I suspect, because people have these opposing views about the past and whether it's relevant, there's a strong discourse in German society that says, hey, the past is in the past. Why are we talking about it? you know, we're done, we've moved on, you know, we let the refugees in, now that's it, now we're done, now no more talk about this stuff, right? Again, this kind of reiteration of a silence perspective. And I suspect, you know, I don't have any data, but I suspect that if you systematically gather dreams from those who support this type of populist approach to the past, that you would come up with different conclusions. Either they would be also dreaming about these collective memories, but in a different way, right? So that they would say like, oh yeah, I'm dreaming about this past, but it you know, I'm trying to come to terms with the fact that it doesn't matter, and I'm mad that I keep hearing about it when you know, I don't want to hear about it anymore. Or maybe they do totally block that out, and for whatever reason, if anybody's psychoanalytically inclined, you can come up with your own idea about, you know, some defensive response to the past or history, and say like, okay, then maybe they don't show up, and then that would be also really interesting, right? Trying to understand how different groups approach, say, in this particular cultural context, German society, how these different groups approach the same topic differently. I suspect that no matter what, you would find some type of difference, both qualitative and quantitative. But unfortunately, I don't have the data to really you know, explain that, you know, or support that suspicion.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Well, we have to finish because we have to leave the room. Melanie, maybe you want to share the link to the Gather Town if you want to come. I don't know if people is coming, but you can share it. Thank you very much, Matthew, for the talk and for the questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I will reshare the Gather Town link just in case anyone wants to come. I'm going to have a break and get some food and maybe come back in 5-10 minutes. If people get there before me and they're like, oh, I'm by myself, just to have a wait. But
what is it, Melanie? 5 or 10 minutes? I don't want to be there by myself looking like an idiot, you know.
Let's make it 10 minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes.
Okay. So
well, I mean, I don't know. Is Marina, are you going?
Yes.
She'll be there.
The link is also in the mail, so.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. So, well, thank you very much, and well, we see you tomorrow. And thank you very much to all the speakers and the participants.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for the effort, right? Because it's very early for you, so thank you very much. Very appreciated.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to make the tomorrow morning. It's 5 a.m. for me is when it starts. So we'll see how that goes.
Good luck.